Warrior Lore. Chapter 685. All the spiritual medicine, including the large amount of high-grade spiritual medicine from the sealed land, had been refined. Du Xiaofu used the remaining time to refine spiritual weapons and talisman weapons. Jin Qingchun could not help him much in terms of being a talisman master. Du Xiaofu could only understand the secret weapon manual left behind by his master, the honored weapon master, and start refining. With his previous experience, Du Xiaofu was able to refine talisman weapons smoothly. In the end, he was able to successfully refine talisman weapons. Rumble. During this period of time, the energy in the ancient barren space fluctuated continuously. Elixirs, talisman weapons, and talisman weapons were successfully refined by Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu used the secret weapon manual left behind by his master, the honored weapon master, to refine talisman weapons and talisman weapons. In terms of materials and refining techniques, there were many differences compared to normal talisman masters. Especially for talisman weapons and talisman weapons, Du Xiaofu infused beast energy into them and increased their power by a lot. In the end, Du Xiaofu also studied the body armor, shields, and other kinds of unorthodox spiritual tools. He made a lot of experimental products, but the results were not bad. All-rounder. This guy is an all-rounder. How can there be such a monster in this world? Jin Qingchun exclaimed. He glanced at Du Xiaofu, who was surrounded by a white divine light. He could only sigh. Not only was he abnormal in martial arts, he was also proficient in elixirs, weapon refinement, and even his attainments in talisman arrays had long surpassed his peers. This kind of person was called an all-rounder. He was also proficient in all kinds of techniques. Such a terrifying person could only be called a monster. If this spread out, many people would be shocked. In the misty space, the surrounding space fluctuated. Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged. The white divine light around him was dazzling. Waves of ancient aura spread out, causing people's hearts to ripple. This guy, is he going to break through again? Sensing the aura fluctuations around Du Xiaofu's body, Jin Qingchun's eyes flickered as he muttered softly, "Looks like you've gained a lot of benefits in these 10 months." In the space, Du Xiaofu's spiritual energy spread out. The white light was dazzling. Under the help of the mysterious weapon manual, his aura kept rising. Rumble. After an unknown period of time, Du Xiaofu's Naiwen Palace suddenly emitted a strong wave of energy, and a dazzling white light spread out. An ancient aura fluctuation suddenly spread out from within his body like a storm. Whoosh! His aura continued to rise. Suddenly, he broke through an invisible barrier and stepped into a new height. The spirit's spiritual soul spirit's mind. The spirit's mind. Spirits in spirit. Spirit of mind. He has reached the level of a 6-star mysterious weapon master. What a powerful spiritual soul spirit. This guy is a monster. Jin Qingchun was shocked. Feeling the spiritual soul spirit in Du Xiaofu's body, he stared in shock. The spiritual soul spirit was many times more powerful than that of an ordinary 6-star mysterious weapon master. Moreover, the ancient and domineering aura made it impossible for an ordinary person's spirit to resist. After a long time, everything calmed down. Du Xiaofu's eyelashes moved slightly. Then, he opened his eyes. The light in his eyes was dazzling. It didn't disperse for a long time. Then, a smile appeared on his face. Finally, 6-star mysterious weapon master. Du Xiaofu murmured. He could clearly feel that the spiritual soul spirit's mind palace was many times more powerful than before. He had finally reached the level of a 6-star mysterious weapon master. Du Xiaofu wasn't surprised by the breakthrough this time. It had been a long time since he had broken through to the 6-star mysterious weapon master. If it wasn't for the fact that he hadn't broken through to the Martial King realm, he would have broken through to the Talisman Dao long ago. This time, when he was in seclusion to refine elixirs and forge weapons, his spiritual soul spirit had been exhausted and recovered more than 10 times. This was also the opportunity for this breakthrough. He had also stepped into the 6-star mysterious weapon master. Feeling the surging spiritual soul energy in the Naiwen Palace in his mind, Du Xiaofu had a feeling that if he were to activate the mysterious soul pupil now, the power would definitely reach an extremely powerful level. It would be enough to cause an ordinary martial king of the Nirvana realm to fall into it if they were careless. 6-star Mysterious Weapon Master. The breakthrough isn't slow. What do you plan to do next? Jin Qingxuan's primordial spirit's body stepped forward and looked at Du Xiaofu. He sized him up. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that there was such a monster in this world. Crack! He stood up and stretched his body. His bones and joints crackled as he felt the carefree feeling that came from the breakthrough in his body. Together with a mouthful of turbid air that followed along his throat, there was an indescribable carefree feeling all over his body. He then said to Jin Qingchun, "It should be about time. Let's go and sell the elixirs and weapons first." Jin Qingchun glanced at Du Xiaofu and said to Du Xiaofu, "Don't reveal the elixir recipes of the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir. It took me a lot of effort to get them. When there's time, I'll tell you a few special elixir recipes." "Don't worry." A smile appeared on Du Xiaofu's face. The elixir recipes of the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir were extraordinary. Naturally, he couldn't reveal them so easily. Seeing Du Xiaofu smile, Jin Qingchun glanced at Du Xiaofu and said with disdain, "The ancient sky sect has quite a few extraordinary methods. If you have time, you should go in and take a look. The ancient sky sect has quite a few trump cards. Don't miss it." Du Xiaofu nodded. After packing up, he left the ancient, desolate space. It was noon outside. After Du Xiaofu left his nest, he went directly to the New World Pavilion in the outer sect. He was filled with anticipation for the New World Pavilion. When Du Xiaofu arrived at the New World Pavilion, Gu Zhongyu didn't disappoint him. The New World Pavilion's decorations were extremely grand. The area wasn't small, and it had a total of 3 floors. The first floor was the main hall. The second floor sold high-grade elixirs and talisman weapons, and the third floor was the VIP room. On the third floor, Gu Zhongyu said to Du Xiaofu, "President, the decorations cost quite a bit of money, but the effect is pretty good." "It's pretty good. Thank you for your hard work." Du Xiaofu patted Gu Zhongyu's shoulder. It had indeed been hard on Gu Zhongyu recently. "It's not hard at all. Thank you, President, for your high regard." Gu Zhongyu smiled. Although it was hard, he was extremely satisfied. This was the president's high regard for him. Everything was handed to him. Now, in the entire Manchu, he could be considered a person with a little face. "Sect Master, there are 2 more days before our World Pavilion opens again. I wonder if the president has already prepared the cultivation resources?" Gu Zhongyu asked Du Xiaofu. This was the question he was most worried about for the past month. "It's all prepared. Although it's not much, it's enough to support us for a period of time." Du Xiaofu handed over several Qingquan pouches that he had already prepared to Gu Zhongyu and said, "Next, think of a way to find more talisman masters to join us." Gu Zhongyu received the Qingquan pouches with a joyful expression. He felt that there should be a lot of cultivation resources in the Qingquan pouches. At the same time, he said to Du Xiaofu in a serious tone, "There aren't many talisman masters in the Manchu to begin with, especially the talisman masters and talisman masters. The stronger ones have already been roped in by the major powers. It won't be easy to get them to join us. I'll think of a way." Du Xiaofu also knew how difficult it would be. There weren't many talisman masters in the ancient heavens sect to begin with, and they had already been roped in by the major powers. Naturally, it wouldn't be easy to get them to join the world society. However, the World Pavilion couldn't possibly rely on themselves to refine pills and spiritual artifacts. Although there were a few talisman masters and talisman masters in the world society, their cultivation levels weren't high enough to support the World Pavilion's needs. Moreover, the most important thing for every talisman master and talisman master was their own cultivation. They couldn't possibly refine pills for the World Pavilion all the time. This made Du Xiaofu rather concerned about this matter. If he roped in a talisman master and talisman master, the World Pavilion would still be in danger and wouldn't be able to truly grow. "President, recently, there have been some disciples looking for me, hoping to purchase profound essence pills and berserk pills in advance. However, I'm worried that there won't be enough profound essence pills and berserk pills to deal with the queue outside, so I didn't dare to agree first," Gu Zhongyu said to Du Xiaofu. "No problem. There are a total of 200 berserk pills and 200 profound essence pills in the Chinkuan pouches. Take out 100 profound essence pills and berserk pills, each to satisfy the disciples in the society first. Just sell them at half price. Du Xiaofu nodded. 200 profound essence pills and berserk pills. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Gu Zhongyu was stunned. He knew that Du Xiaofu must have been refining berserk pills and profound essence pills in the past month. However, Gu Zhongyu didn't expect Du Xiaofu to refine so many pills in a month. 200 berserker pills and profound essence pills. What a terrifying number this was. Gu Zhongyu naturally didn't know that Du Xiaofu had been in the ancient desolate space for 10 months. Most importantly, there were experts like Zhan Qingshun helping to refine the pills. Although Zhan Qingshun was refining pills in the form of a primordial spirit, it was still easy for him to refine them in large batches. Chapter 686. Also, there are 20 King-grade Berserker pills and 20 King-grade Xinyuan pills in my Chinkuan bag. I can raise the price a little. Du Xiaofu smiled. He had obtained quite a number of high-grade elixirs from the sealed land. These King-grade Xinyuan pills and Berserker pills were among them. There are still King-grade elixirs. Gu Zhongyu was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on his face. For inner sect disciples, the effect of the marquee-grade Berserker pill and profound Yuan pill was not that great. However, the King-grade Berserker pill and profound Yuan pill were different and would undoubtedly be more popular. After that, Du Xiaofu carefully explained to Gu Zhongyu the various elixirs, totem weapons, practitioner weapons, armors, shields, and other items that he had refined in his Chinkuan bag before leaving. Gu Zhongyu was left on the 3rd floor. He was stunned for a long time. When Du Xiaofu returned to Tianmu Peak, it was already dusk. He planned to visit his master, Elder Gu Qingyang. When he arrived at Tianmu Peak, Du Xiaofu learned from Yuanli that his master, Elder Gu Qingyang, had gone on a long journey. It seemed that he had something to do in the Manchu. Du Xiaofu bade farewell to Yuanli and went straight to the ancient bronze space. Du Xiaofu had just inquired about the location of the ancient bronze space from his 3rd senior brother, Yuanli. The ancient sky sect had 3 special spaces. They were the ancient gold space, the ancient silver space, and the ancient bronze space. These 3 spaces corresponded to the 3 years of ancient sky sect disciples. It was said that in each space, there were all kinds of martial skills, talisman arrays, beast energy, secret techniques, etc. However, the levels were different. The martial skills, talisman arrays, beast energy, secret techniques, etc. in the ancient silver space were better than the ancient bronze space, but not as good as the ancient gold space. In order to enter these 3 spaces, one had to use the gold energy talisman, silver energy talisman, and bronze energy talisman. Otherwise, one would be pushed out. Of course, no matter which year a disciple was from. As long as they had the corresponding energy talisman, they could enter the different spaces. However, if one was not strong enough, they would not be able to comprehend anything even if they entered the higher spaces. It would just be a waste of energy talismans. When Du Xiaofu arrived at the entrance of the ancient bronze space, a deacon who recognized Du Xiaofu smiled and asked Du Xiaofu if he was going to enter the ancient bronze space. Entering the ancient bronze space required copper energy talismans, which would be directly deducted from the badge. 1 copper energy talisman could only last for 10 days. Du Xiaofu nodded, and he was not worried about the talisman. Previously, Du Xiaofu had obtained a large number of copper energy talismans from plundering the previous bronze rankings. He had placed more than half of them on sale at the World Pavilion, and there were still quite a number left on him. After understanding some of the rules and precautions of the energy copper talisman, Du Xiaofu entered the ancient bronze space under the watchful eyes of the deacon. The so-called ancient bronze space was a space that was sealed by itself. To Du Xiaofu, who was an all-round talisman master, it was not difficult for him to understand the mysteries. However, he knew that he was far from being able to do so with his current cultivation. The ancient bronze space was different from what Du Xiaofu had imagined, but it was to be expected. Overall, the ancient bronze space was a vast space. There were insights, cultivation experiences, and all kinds of cultivation explanations left behind by the ancient heaven sect's ancestors. In the ancient bronze space, all kinds of martial techniques and talisman arrays were displayed on huge jade tablets for all disciples to comprehend. Along the way, Du Xiaofu saw many familiar figures in the ancient bronze space. Some of the inner sect disciples were comprehending martial techniques, some were comprehending beast energy, and some were immersed in the insights of their ancestors. They did not pay attention to others and were immersed in their own world, trying their best to comprehend and cultivate. Du Xiaofu was not very interested in the various beast energy, martial techniques, and talisman arrays in the ancient bronze space. The various beast energy, talisman arrays, and martial techniques in the ancient desolate space were enough for Du Xiaofu to comprehend. Du Xiaofu knew that he should not bite off more than he could chew. It was enough for him to choose something suitable for himself. Cultivating the cultivation method of the golden-winged rock and comprehending the beast energy of the golden-winged rock was enough to surpass all other beasts. The other beast energy could only be used as support for Du Xiaofu. In terms of talisman arrays, Du Xiaofu felt that he had never seen anyone stronger than his big brother, Shen Qingchun. As for weapon talisman master, with the sacred body art and secret weapon art left by his master, the revered weapon, it was enough for him. Therefore, in the ancient bronze space, what attracted Du Xiaofu the most were the insights and cultivation insights left behind by the ancient sky sect's ancestors. On the path of cultivation, strengthening the body, extending one's lifespan, and seizing energy are all in defiance of the heavens. The heavens and earth are not benevolent and treat all living things as straw dogs. Supremes are not benevolent and treat all living things as straw dogs. Those who obey the heavens may not exist, but those who defy the heavens should be laughed at. In front of a huge stone wall, Du Xiaofu seriously muttered to himself. This was the cultivation insight left behind by an ancient sky sect's ancestor. The preface at the beginning attracted Du Xiaofu's attention. Ignoring the strength of this Manchu ancestor, the words at the beginning resonated with Du Xiaofu. On the path of cultivation, the strong were respected and went against the heavens. The weak lived a mediocre life, while the strong looked down on all living things. Everything had to be fought for by oneself. After Du Xiaofu entered the ancient bronze space, the ancient sky sect's outer sect was in an uproar. The World Pavilion opened for business the day before, but the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir were only sold on the second day. It was said that the King-grade Berserk elixir and Xinyuan elixir were on sale, which made the inner sect disciples very excited. In order to be able to buy the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir on the second day, a large number of disciples rushed into the World Pavilion to buy cultivation resources. The World Pavilion was overcrowded, and a large number of World Society disciples had no choice but to come and help. At the same time, Gu Zhongyu also introduced the main spiritual weapons and practitioner weapons of the World Pavilion. Spiritual weapons and practitioner weapons that were infused with various beasts' energy were definitely not comparable to ordinary spiritual weapons and practitioner weapons of the same level. Of course, the prices were also extremely high. Previously, when Gu Zhongyu introduced the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir, many disciples missed it and regretted it. Therefore, this time, under Gu Zhongyu's introduction, over 20 spiritual weapons and a few practitioner weapons were sold out in a day. Even those unorthodox talisman weapons, spirit weapons, shields, and body armors were all sold out within a day. There were also various elixirs and cultivation resources that were sold out like hotcakes. Even some martial skills, talisman array cultivation methods, and so on were sold out by some people who wanted to reach the level of VIP members. Du Xiaofu, who was in the ancient bronze space, did not expect that in just one day, the elixirs that he had prepared for 10 months had almost all been sold. The spiritual weapons, talisman weapons, and other items had all been sold out. As for World Pavilion's daily sales, the surrounding shops could only look on with envy and jealousy. The supply was far from meeting the demand. According to the calculations of those who wanted to become VIP members, the World Pavilion was able to attract close to 10,000 members with the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir. Most of the members came late, so the World Pavilion had nothing to sell and could only return empty-handed. That night, when the sales volume was calculated, it was rumored that Gu Zhongyu of the World Pavilion laughed the entire night. The next morning, when the World Pavilion opened its doors, there was already a sea of people on the streets. They were all here for the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir. 100 Marquis grade Berserk elixir and Xinyuan elixir, as well as 20 King grade Xinyuan elixir and Xinyuan elixir, were sold out in less than 2 hours. Originally, there were some disciples who complained that the World Pavilion required VIP members to purchase the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir. But now, they saw that the World Pavilion was still selling the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir at the original price and did not increase the price at all. Such a good price instantly made many disciples have a good impression of the World Pavilion, and the World Pavilion's reputation soared. In 2 hours, the Berserk elixir and Xinyuan elixir were sold out. Only those with the highest VIP members could purchase the elixir in advance. The rest could only wait for the World Pavilion's notice to purchase the elixir according to their VIP rank. Although those who did not purchase the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir were unhappy, they did not dare to cause trouble outside the World Pavilion. Everyone knew that the World Pavilion was backed by Martial Uncle Du. If they offended the terrifying Martial Uncle Du, they would not be able to hold a high position in the Manchu. With Martial Uncle Du's strength, not many people could afford to offend him. In the World Pavilion, the cultivation resources that Du Xiaofu had prepared for 10 months, in addition to some of the original stock, were all sold out under the influence of the Xinyuan pills and Berserk pills. There was truly nothing left to sell. In the end, Gu Zhongyu had no choice but to announce that the shop owner was too tired and would rest for a few days before reopening. In the next few days, things were not over yet. Some disciples received news that as a member of the World Club, not only could they purchase the Xinyuan elixir and Berserk elixir in advance, they could even purchase the elixir at half price. With such benefits, many disciples immediately came to join the World Club. This made the World Club disciples walk with their heads held high, as if they were superior to others. As for those disciples who were introduced to the World Club by Gu Zhongyu, they realized that the World Club's spiritual weapons and talisman weapons were indeed extraordinary. They were all infused with beast souls, and their power was greatly increased. It was not something that spiritual weapons and talisman weapons of the same level could compare to. This immediately made the World Pavilion's products famous. The disciples who received the news immediately surrounded the World Pavilion and announced that they would purchase the products, even if it was at a high price. However, the World Pavilion's doors were closed. The shop owner was too tired and would rest for a few days before reopening. I wanted to update 5 times today, but I only completed 4. Xiaoyu, continue to work hard tomorrow. Today's update is over. Brothers, rest early. Chapter 687. President, did you go into seclusion again? Within the World Pavilion, Gu Zhongyu had a bitter look on his face. The newly reopened World Pavilion actually had nothing to sell in just 2 days. Isn't that Martial Uncle Du? Why is he standing in front of the stone wall? It's said that there's a profound martial art recorded on the stone wall, but no one has been able to comprehend it. It must be a rumor. If there's really a profound martial art on the stone wall, the Manchu wouldn't have left it in the ancient bronze space. Don't disturb Martial Uncle Du, he's not someone to be trifled with. In the ancient bronze space, some of the Manchu disciples noticed Du Xiaofu standing on the stone wall. They saw Du Xiaofu standing alone in front of a stone wall in a daze. Everyone was discussing and whispering, but no one dared to disturb him. Many of the disciples in the ancient heaven sect knew about the stone wall. It was said that there were profound martial arts recorded on the stone wall, but no one had been able to comprehend it. Over the years, many talented people in the ancient heaven sect had tried to comprehend the stone wall. However, no one had been able to find any clues from the stone wall. In the end, they could only return empty-handed. Du Xiaofu stood in front of the stone wall and stared at the words on the stone wall for a long time. Heaven and earth are heartless, treating all things as straw dogs. The sovereign is heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. Those who obey the heavens may not survive. Those who defy the heavens should laugh. Du Xiaofu muttered seriously. The strange thing was that other than the words on the stone wall, there were some cultivation experiences left behind by the ancestor. However, there weren't any martial arts or mental cultivation methods. There was only a preface and some simple cultivation experiences carved on the stone wall. Those cultivation experiences were very strange. They were all very simple cultivation experiences, and there was nothing special about them. Ordinary disciples wouldn't pay much attention to them. How could an ancestor who could comprehend so many things only leave behind such simple cultivation experiences? Du Xiaofu stood quietly in front of the stone wall. He couldn't believe it. For an ancestor to have such a deep understanding of cultivation, his understanding of cultivation would definitely not be so simple. He carefully looked at the preface and cultivation experiences on the stone wall again, but he still didn't discover anything. Du Xiaofu carefully looked at the cultivation experiences on the stone wall for the third time, but he still didn't discover anything. Is there really nothing special about it? Du Xiaofu frowned and stared at the stone wall in a daze. He still couldn't believe it. In Du Xiaofu's opinion, the cultivation experience of an ancestor who had that kind of understanding would definitely not be as simple as what everyone else knew. There must be something hidden there. Du Xiaofu believed in his intuition and firmly believed that the insights on the stone wall were extremely abnormal. Du Xiaofu's stubborn temper flared up. Just like when he was in the Stone City, he began to ponder over the cultivation experiences on the stone wall, observing it over and over again. It's been a few days. Where is Master Du? Master Du isn't possessed, is he? There's nothing special on the stone wall. Chi la la. On the 9th day, under Du Xiaofu's observation, the characters on the stone wall suddenly began to fluctuate faintly. Then the characters seemed to be alive. Under Du Xiaofu's careful pondering, they began to fluctuate slowly, as if forming a vortex on the stone wall, releasing a faint light. There's a reaction. Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled. He stared at the character vortex, as if it was summoning something to him. After a little hesitation, Du Xiaofu stepped forward and stretched out his hand slightly. A faint golden qi gushed out of his palm and directly touched the character vortex. Qi. At this moment, something strange happened. Du Xiaofu felt that the profound qi in his palm was actually being devoured by the character vortex. In that instant, Du Xiaofu could not help it. The endless profound qi in his body began to be devoured by the character vortex on the stone wall. Caught off guard by this situation, Du Xiaofu retreated in shock. But Du Xiaofu realized that he could not help it and could not avoid it. However, it was only for a short moment, and the stone wall emitted a cracking sound. Ka. The sound of cracking came from the stone wall. If not for Du Xiaofu's sharp soul force and being so close, it would have been difficult to notice. Could it be that profound qi is needed to open this stone wall? The faint cracking sound on the stone wall gave Du Xiaofu a glimmer of hope. His shock turned into surprise, and he began to allow the profound qi in his body to continuously pour into the character vortex. Walala. As a result, the profound qi in Du Xiaofu's body poured out like a flood, continuously pouring into the vortex on the stone wall. As the profound qi in Du Xiaofu's body poured in, the character vortex on the stone wall released a dazzling light, as if something was about to erupt. The dazzling light began to spread out, and an extremely domineering aura descended. There's a change in the stone wall. Did Martial Uncle Du obtain something? Oh my God, which stone wall changed? What a domineering aura! This commotion immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding disciples in the ancient bronze space. Many of the disciples who were cultivating were awakened and looked over, but they did not dare to approach. Walala! Dazzling light accompanied by a domineering aura swept down. On the stone wall, a dazzling light began to crack, and then covered the entire stone wall. The dazzling light burst out, becoming more and more dazzling, causing people's eyes to hurt. In the end, Du Xiaofu had no choice but to close his eyes. Walala! Just as Du Xiaofu closed his eyes, a dazzling light burst out from the stone wall. The character vortex left the stone wall and shot out, directly enveloping Du Xiaofu's body. The dazzling character vortex enveloped Du Xiaofu, appearing extremely strange. Then, it directly swept into Du Xiaofu's forehead, entering Du Xiaofu's mind without any obstruction. When the characters entered his mind, Du Xiaofu could not help but let out a miserable cry. It was as if something was about to explode in his mind, and a huge thing was forcefully poured in. At the same time, An extremely domineering and sharp voice resounded in Du Xiaofu's mind. Heaven and earth are not benevolent, treating all things as straw dogs. Sovereigns are not benevolent, treating the common people as straw dogs. Following the heavens may not exist. Defying the heavens should be laughed at. On the path of cultivation, going against the heavens is impossible without great perseverance and perseverance. The Tao of heaven and earth uses yin and yang to create all things. Heaven and earth, the sun and moon, thunder and lightning, wind and rain, male and female, hard and soft, movement and stillness. All things are divided into yin and yang. The principles of life use yin and yang to nourish the bones, meridians, bones, flesh, abdomen, back, 5 internal organs, 6 bowels, and even 7 damages and 8 benefits. Within the body, there is no one that does not conform to the principles of yin and yang. Man and heaven and earth are related, corresponding to the sun and moon. The essence of one body is connected to heaven and earth and should be applied to all things. Tai Chi refers to the origin of Yuan Qi before heaven and earth were separated. Tai Chi gives birth to yin and yang give birth to the 4 divisions. The 4 divisions gather in the black and yellow, stabilizing the 8 directions and suppressing the common people. The fact that you can enter the divine seal that I have left behind is enough to prove that you are a person with great perseverance, and the cultivation method you practice is also tyrannical. That is why you have the fate to enter my divine seal. I have left behind the first seal of the black and yellow 4-division seal, the Shaoyang seal. Those who are fated will be able to obtain my true teachings. The tyrannical voice disappeared from Du Xiaofu's mind, and then the pain in Du Xiaofu's mind also disappeared. But at this time, in Du Xiaofu's mind, there was a dazzling symbol, which was a cultivation method of martial arts. Black and yellow 4-division seal. The first seal is Shaoyang, the second seal is Shaoyin, the third seal is Taiyin, and the 4th seal is Taiyang. The 4 seals are connected to form the black and yellow emperor's seal, which is enough to suppress the common people and move mountains and seas. What a tyrannical martial art! Looking at this, Du Xiaofu's mind trembled. The tyrannical power of the black and yellow 4-division seal seemed to be on par with the tyrannical power of the golden-winged roc and the mysterious move. Compared to the martial arts that Du Xiaofu had seen over the years, other than his own mysterious move and the golden-winged roc's cultivation method, this was undoubtedly the most tyrannical and extraordinary martial art that Du Xiaofu had seen over the years. However, when he was in Tianwu Academy, Du Xiaofu felt that the cultivation method that Qi Yeshi practiced was also very strong, and was not inferior to the mysterious move and the golden-winged roc's cultivation method. Then, Du Xiaofu comprehended the information in the symbol, which was the cultivation method of the first seal of the black and yellow 4-division seal, the Shaoyang seal. Du Xiaofu knew that cultivating the Shaoyang seal was not easy. If one did not cultivate a tyrannical cultivation method, one could not cultivate this martial art. Otherwise, one would suffer from qi deviation. The black and yellow 4-division seal was also very difficult to cultivate. It was not an ordinary martial art, but a martial art that contained the profound meaning of heaven and earth, as well as the mysteries of yin and yang. Du Xiaofu frowned. He did not expect the Shaoyang seal to be so difficult to cultivate. If he wanted to successfully cultivate the black and yellow 4-division seal, he did not know how difficult it would be. This kind of martial arts, compared to ordinary martial arts, was completely unique. It was also extremely different from the mysterious move. However, for Du Xiaofu, there was no reason not to cultivate such a tyrannical martial art. Chapter 688. However, he didn't have much time to cultivate. Everything on the dazzling stone wall began to calm down as all the gazes in the surroundings landed on Du Xiaofu. I wonder what benefits martial Uncle Du received. I wonder what kind of terrifying martial technique is hidden in the stone wall. Maybe it's a cultivation technique. Martial Uncle Du is so lucky. What's inside must be extraordinary. It would be great if I could get my hands on it. The surrounding disciples were envious. They guessed that Du Xiaofu must have received some great benefits. The commotion just now was extraordinary. Everything calmed down and the stone wall returned to normal. However, at this time, Cracks had already appeared on the huge stone wall, and it had become an ordinary stone tablet that couldn't be any more ordinary. Du Xiaofu smiled and stood with his hands behind his back. Now that he had obtained the cultivation method of the Xianhuang 4 images seal, he could find some time to comprehend it. After so many days, he also needed to check out the situation in the World Pavilion. After leaving the ancient bronze space, Du Xiaofu didn't go to Tianmu Peak. Instead, he went to the World Pavilion. When he reached the outer sect's World Pavilion, Du Xiaofu paused for a moment. Looking ahead, there was a sea of people outside the World Pavilion. They were so crowded that not even a drop of water could pass through. Loud noises could be heard from afar. Frowning, Du Xiaofu disappeared from the spot. Outside the World Pavilion, amidst the crowd of spectators, there were two groups of several hundred people facing each other. The World Society members near the World Pavilion were led by Gu Zhongyu and a few others. There were hundreds of them gathered together. Many of the World Society members had bruises all over their faces. Even the people at the front had injuries on their bodies. Their faces were filled with anger. However, at this moment, facing a group of no less than 300 people, especially those extremely powerful auras at the front, the World Society's disciples had no choice but to endure silently. Gu Zhongyu had blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the 300 Manchu disciples in front of him with anger. These 300-plus disciples all seemed to have come prepared. Their faces were arrogant, and their expressions were filled with provocation. Among the 300 people, there was a young man in a blue robe at the front. He looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. He was quite handsome and arrogant. There were many young men clustered around him. Beside the blue-robed youth, there was a woman in her 20s. She wore a long dress and had an extraordinary temperament. She was beautiful and fair, with a pair of bright and slender eyes. She had a classical oriental beauty. The woman's figure was curvaceous, attracting the gazes of many people present. They secretly swept their gazes over her exquisite and curvaceous figure. "Senior brethren, don't go too far." Gu Zhongyu stared at the leading blue-robed youth. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with anger, but he knew that he was no match for the blue-robed youth. He could only endure. The blue-robed youth looked at Gu Zhongyu with his arms crossed in front of his chest. He looked at Gu Zhongyu with disdain. He did not hide the contempt in his eyes as he said, "Brat, your World Pavilion sold fake medicine and caused my 4C's sect to suffer heavy injuries. They almost lost their lives. If you don't give us an explanation today, I'm afraid our 4C's sect will not let this matter rest." "Bullshit. Our World Pavilion's Xianyuan elixir and Berserk elixir have no problems at all. So many people have taken them, and there's no problem. Why are you the only ones who have taken them? You're obviously jealous of our World Pavilion and want to take this opportunity to make things difficult for us." A young man beside Gu Zhongyu was enraged. He was also an inner sect disciple this time, and had followed Master Du in his adventures. He had beaten up and besieged the experts who were ranked on the bronze board. Therefore, he was less afraid of the blue-robed young man. "Humph, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I said that there's a problem with your Xianyuan elixir and Berserk elixir. You must give our 4C's sect an explanation today. Otherwise, we'll raise your World Pavilion to the ground." The blue-robed youth was still sneering as he looked at the hundreds of people at the entrance of the World Pavilion. Not a single one of them was a martial king. He did not take them seriously at all. The beautiful woman beside him had a smile on her face as a cold sneer flashed across her eyes. "Why don't we just raise them to the ground? The small World Pavilion dares to sell fake elixirs. They can't be left alive. Teach these brats who don't know their limits a good lesson." In the 4C's sect's formation, more than 300 disciples rubbed their fists and were eager to give it a try. They were constantly mocking and provoking them. They did not take Gu Zhongyu and the other World Society disciples seriously at all. The 4C's sect is too powerful. Martial Uncle Du is not here. The World Society can't be compared to the 4C's sect. I heard that it's not just the 4C's sect. There are a few other big forces that have been secretly preparing to deal with the World Society. I guess the World Pavilion has been snatching too much business recently. The World Pavilion is going to be unlucky today. The surrounding spectators whispered. They did not dare to speak loudly and did not dare to stand out. With the Four Seas sect's influence in the ancient Heaven sect, not many people dared to stand out. Gu Zhangyu and the other World Society disciples looked at each other with grave expressions. At this moment, there was not a single martial king among the World Society disciples. Even Hao Guan, Mo1, Mu Jia, Qiao Ming, and the others were in seclusion in the secret area. They were currently powerless against the Four Seas sect. They had already been ruthlessly trampled once. Think about it carefully. My patience is limited. If you don't give the Four Seas sect an explanation, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. The blue-robed youth glanced at Gu Zhangyu and the others and said with a mocking gaze, I wonder what kind of explanation you want. Just as the blue-robed young man finished speaking, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded from the crowd. Then, the crowd became restless. A purple-robed youth with a broad sword wrapped in purple cloth on his back slowly walked to the center of the square. The purple-robed youth looked to be 17 or 18 years old. On his resolute face, his clear eyes were extremely calm and unperturbed. President is here. Greetings, President. When they saw this figure, the hundreds of people outside the World Pavilion immediately revealed a look of pleasant surprise on their solemn faces as they crowded around him. President. Gu Zhangyu and the other leaders felt as though they were being pardoned as they immediately rushed to his side. When this purple-robed youth appeared, many of the Four Seas sect disciples' gazes began to change slightly. Many of them, who were originally extremely provocative, could not help but restrain themselves a little. When the beautiful lady beside the blue-robed youth saw the purple-robed youth suddenly appear, there was a faint trace of resentment that did not leave a trace in her eyes. President, they are from the Four Seas sect. They said that our Xinyuan pill and Berserk pill are fake and want us to give them an explanation. They even injured many of our people. Gu Zhangyu immediately made the long story short and whispered in Du Xiaofu's ear. The blue-robed youth leading them is called Enchantment. He is the deputy leader of the Four Seas sect. It is said that he is a martial king at the Nirvana realm. He is also an expert who is currently ranked on the gold leaderboard. When Du Xiaofu heard this, his gaze swept across the World Club disciples. Many of them were heavily injured with bruises all over their faces. Instantly, his expression turned gloomy as he looked at the blue-robed youth in front of him. Looks like you are that Du Xiaofu. It's good that you are here. For the sake of Elder Gu Qingyang, I will not make things difficult for you. Give the Four Seas sect an explanation and I will let you off today. When he saw Du Xiaofu, Chongqing still had his arms crossed as he laughed at Du Xiaofu mockingly. Hearing Chongqing's words, Du Xiaofu quietly looked at Chongqing and said, Bow and apologize to all the World Club disciples who were injured and compensate for their medical expenses. Otherwise, bear the consequences. Du Xiaofu's tone was rather gloomy. At this moment, everyone could hear the displeasure and coldness in his voice. When he heard Du Xiaofu's words and realized that the other party's attitude was actually this unyielding, Chongqing was also quite stunned. After which, a vicious and sinister expression appeared on his handsome face. Chongqing looked at Du Xiaofu as the corner of his mouth curled into a cold arc. He said in a deep voice, Brat, don't think that you can run amok in the ancient sky sect just because you have some ability in Elder Gu Qingyang's identity. Everything in the ancient sky sect depends on strength. If you don't have the strength, then behave yourself. Otherwise, no one will be able to protect you. Chapter 689. As his voice faded, Chongqing looked at Du Xiaofu. His handsome face had become much gloomier. Waves of chill spread out from his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble for no reason. Many of the onlookers immediately retreated one after another. Du Xiaofu, if you have the ability, let's meet at the Tianwu Plaza. Otherwise, you better behave. You can't afford to offend everyone in the ancient sky sect. The corner of Chongqing's mouth curled into a cold smile, revealing a hint of provocation. As soon as he finished speaking, the profound energy in his body faintly fluctuated. On the street below his feet, tiny cracks spread out one after another, all the way towards Du Xiaofu. You're right. Everything in the ancient sky sect depends on strength. The Tianwu Plaza is too far away. let's meet here. As soon as Changqing finished speaking, the corner of Du Xiaofu's mouth also curled into a cold smile. Golden profound energy surged under his feet as he heavily stomped forward. Crack, crack. As he stomped down on Du Xiaofu, golden profound energy poured into the ground. The cracks that spread out under Changqing's feet suddenly stopped and began to spread back in the opposite direction. The ground suddenly began to tremble. On the rather wide street, as Changqing and Du Xiaofu released their auras, the expressions of the onlookers that were packed to the brim changed drastically, and they retreated one after another. At the same time, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Du Xiaofu's figure actually disappeared from the spot. Du Xiaofu's figure was the first to move. He turned into a purple afterimage and floated like a god. He directly appeared in front of Changqing in an unpredictable manner. Brat, do you want to make a move now? If you want to be tortured, I'll fulfill your wish. As Changqing's cold voice came out from his mouth, the aura around his body erupted at the same time. As Du Xiaofu's afterimage swept out, he was definitely not a weakling. As his hand seals formed, a claw that was wrapped in talismans and mysterious runes condensed. With a sharp sound of tearing through the air, he directly grabbed at Du Xiaofu's purple afterimage. Crack! The claw collapsed the space. With one hand, he actually accurately grabbed Du Xiaofu's purple afterimage. He forcefully tore through the air and tore Du Xiaofu's body into pieces. However, not a single drop of blood flowed out. So fast. At this moment, Changqing seemed to have sensed something. His gloomy face changed slightly as he spun around rapidly. The aura of a martial king at the Nirvana realm gushed out from his body and swept out. A large area of space shook violently and was on the verge of collapse. Boom! In just an instant, a palm print condensed in Changqing's palm. The mysterious runes of the talisman rippled like the tide. The palm print became crystal clear and was about to directly hit the air beside him. At that moment, Du Xiaofu's about. Du Xiaofu s. Is Du Xiao, Du. SNN at. Is NN Nias is and Duza's SSSNN his. That. Profound soul eye. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's eyes seemed to shoot out rays of light that were tens of thousands of feet long. The strange, mysterious runes of the talisman overlapped with each other. In the blink of an eye, the dazzling talisman runes enveloped the sky like a bright moon and enveloped Changqing. All of a sudden, the moment Changqing was illuminated by the rune light in Du Xiaofu's eyes, his cold and gloomy eyes suddenly became sluggish, as if they were frozen. The moment the palm print in his hand fell in front of Du Xiaofu, it also stopped and dissipated in an extremely strange manner. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of Changqing as if there was no one there. A tyrannical and ferocious aura suddenly spread out, causing the space to tremble. His hand was like a palm leaf fan as it slapped out. Walala! Dense layers of faint golden talisman runes flickered and condensed. Du Xiaofu's golden wings, which were like the wings of a golden-winged rock, erupted with a golden light and directly slapped onto the sluggish Changqing's body. At the last moment, Changqing regained his senses. But it was too late. His pupils constricted. Changqing seemed to have felt some kind of terrifying aura, and his eyes were filled with shock and fear. Chi-la-la! Du Xiaofu's hand was like thunder, and it landed on Changqing's body at lightning speed. Rumble! The golden talisman runes shot out, and a large area of the street exploded. Layers of stone slabs were overturned, and gravel shot out. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, countless gazes trembled. Changqing's body flew out like a kite on a wire. He flew for more than 100 feet before falling down, causing the street to crack and gravel to fly everywhere. Poochie! Mouthfuls of blood sprayed out from Changqing's mouth. His face was filled with shock and fear. Changqing had never imagined that he wouldn't even be able to withstand a single move from Du Xiaofu. Originally, Changqing did not take the rumored Du Xiaofu seriously, but in the end, he was so cruel to him. The surrounding area was silent, and it was dead silent. Gulp, gulp, then, the sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard. Oh my God, Changqing, who is ranked on the alchemy roll, can't even withstand a single blow. Martial Uncle Du's strength is too terrifying. Everyone was shocked at this moment. In front of Chongqing, who was in the Nirvana realm of Martial King realm, Du Xiaofu actually severely injured his opponent with one move. How terrifying was that? The beautiful woman, who was originally filled with a sinister chill, suddenly had fear in her eyes when she saw Chongqing's end. She, Zhou Yinger, definitely did not expect such an outcome. Pucci, blood spurted out from Chongqing's mouth. After struggling several times, he could not get up, and his face was ashen. The more than 300 disciples of the Four Seas sect, who were originally looking at him with disdain, were all dumbfounded at this moment, and fear surged in their eyes. Du Xiaofu stood quietly in the field. He originally did not take the ordinary Martial King realm Nirvana realm cultivators too seriously. Not long ago, not only did he break through to the initial Martial King realm, but he also broke through to the mysterious level of radiation protection, and the power of his mysterious soul eyes had greatly increased. To deal with Chongqing, Du Xiaofu did not take him seriously at all. It was a good opportunity to test his current strength. Glancing at the more than 300 disciples of the Four Seas sect, Du Xiaofu's resolute and determined face looked slightly cold. He said indifferently, "Everyone, leave a complete marquis-grade elixir as compensation for the medical expenses and get lost. Otherwise, bear the consequences." His indifferent voice carried a chill that could be felt by anyone, causing the more than 300 disciples of the Four Seas sect to look at each other with fear in their eyes. After that, the disciples beside him did not dare to refuse at all. They all took out a complete marquis-grade elixir and gave it to the disciples of the World Society. Chongqing's fate was on the ground. Chongqing, who was in the Nirvana realm Martial King realm and ranked on the alchemy roll, was severely injured in one move and could not even get up. Who would dare to provoke Du Xiaofu? A complete marquis-grade elixir was definitely all the wealth of the disciples with lower cultivation. However, no one dared to refuse or disobey at this moment. Although it was painful and regretful, they could only obey obediently. I hope all of you can hear me clearly. If you want to find trouble with the World Pavilion, just bring it on. I just don't know if you can bear the consequences. Du Xiaofu looked at the disciples of the Four Seas sect and scolded them. He waved his sleeves and said, "You can get lost now. Go quickly." The disciples of the Four Seas sect felt as if they had been pardoned. They supported Chongqing, who could not get up, and immediately left the World Pavilion as if they were fleeing for their lives. After a dispute and confrontation, the disciples of the World Society, who were originally bullied, actually solved the problem with one move after Du Xiaofu's arrival. This allowed the World Society to hold their heads high and heavily suppress the prestige of the Four Seas sect. "President, good job." The people of the World Society were all excited. Without a doubt, after the humiliation and bullying this time, there was a sense of unity in the end. Martial Uncle Du's strength seems to have increased by quite a bit. I didn't expect Chongqing of the Four Seas sect to be so weak. Now that Martial Uncle Du is out, I wonder if the World Pavilion will open for business again. Who knows, there might be Berserker Elixir and Primordial Elixir for sale again. The surrounding crowd of onlookers gradually dispersed, along with the news of Chongqing, who was ranked on the alchemy roll, being unable to withstand a single blow, quickly spread throughout the sect. Many disciples gathered in the World Pavilion. From Gu Zhongyu and a few inner-sect disciples, Du Xiaofu roughly understood what had happened during this period of time. His expression also darkened slightly. Originally, the World Pavilion had nothing to sell these few days, so the Four Seas sect gathered some people to cause trouble. They said that the disciples of the Four Seas sect had consumed the Primordial Elixir and Berserker Elixir of the World Pavilion and almost died. The World Pavilion sold the Berserker Elixir and Primordial Elixir at a high price and closed down after that. It was obvious that they were trying to cheat money and sell fake elixirs. The disciples of the World Pavilion were naturally indignant. In the dispute, the people of the Four Seas sect took action. The people of the World Society were naturally not a match for them and suffered quite a bit in the beginning. As for what happened later, Du Xiaofu also saw it. "President, I've received news that the Four Seas sect has helped their forces to gather quite a few forces and are planning to take action against our World Pavilion. They're obviously jealous of our World Pavilion's business. They have the advantage in numbers, so I'm afraid they won't let this matter rest. We have to be prepared in advance, Gu Zhongyu said to Du Xiaofu. Although Du Xiaofu defeated in Chongqing with a single blow today, Gu Zhongyu's expression was still slightly serious. He was very clear about the strength of those fellows. Many forces had already secretly formed an alliance. Chapter 690. Joining forces, Du Xiaofu's eyes flashed with coldness. As someone who had come from the dark forest, Du Xiaofu was very clear about the power struggle. Although this was the ancient heaven sect, the ancient heaven sect also had its own world. However, no matter where it was, all the rules had to follow one principle: the strong were respected. It couldn't escape from the word strength. Strength was the absolute truth. How many powers have joined forces? Du Xiaofu asked Gu Zhongyu. From what I know, there are many powers that have joined forces. The most active ones should be the Four Seas Gang, Yunji Hui, and the Forgotten Dust sect. These three powers all have shops in their hands and have the best business in the ancient heaven sect. Even the Manchu's deacon has to give them face. Every month, they sell to the Manchu a shocking amount of profit. They are the suppliers of many large businesses outside. Gu Zhongyu pursed his pale lips and continued to speak to Du Xiaofu. The Four Seas Gang, Yunji Hui, and Forgotten Dust sect have many alchemy talisman masters and weapon talisman masters. Many of them are experts above the 6-star level. The strength of the three major forces was also very strong. Now, many of the experts on the silver leaderboard were their people. Most importantly, many of the experts on the gold leaderboard were also from the three major forces. Especially the Four Seas Gang's leader, Chongqing Hai, Yunji Hui's leader, Fei Qingming, and Forgotten Dust sect's leader, Bai Yichen. These three people are ranked 10th, 9th, and 8th respectively on the gold ranking. It is said that their strength has reached the Martial King realm. They are all outstanding talents and are very powerful. They are already famous in the outside world. Outstanding talents at the Martial King realm. They are not weak. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. When these people joined forces, it was indeed difficult to deal with. The lineup of these three powers was not to be underestimated. What are you afraid of? At most, we will fight with them. The gold ranking is nothing. Yes, the gold ranking is nothing. Wasn't in Chongqing defeated by our leader today? Back in the giant rock space, the guy on the silver ranking was also trampled by us. At most, we will fight with them. On the 3rd floor of the World Pavilion, many inner sect disciples were furious. With Du Xiaofu around, they had nothing to fear. All right, everyone, go down and recuperate. I'll think of something. World Pavilion is not a pushover. Du Xiaofu said. Yes, leader. Everyone nodded and began to recuperate Pavilion. In the end, only Gu and Du Xiaofu were World Pavilion world. Looking at Du Xiaofu's rather gloomy expression, Gu Zhongyu hesitated for a moment before saying, Chairman, we have nothing to sell now. The World Pavilion has already been closed for almost 10 days. In addition to the rumors that have been deliberately spread recently, the people outside are already fearful of our World Pavilion. In the past few days, there have even been people who have come to cancel their VIP membership. This is rather troublesome, Du Xiaofu frowned. Compared to the Four Seas Gang, Forgotten Dust sect, and Yunji Hui, World Pavilion's lack of goods is the most troublesome matter. You should go and recuperate as well. I'll think of a way to resolve this. Du Xiaofu said to Gu Zhongyu. I feel that we have to find a way to attract some medicine symbol masters and weapon symbol masters to join us. Although it's difficult, there shouldn't be a better way. After Gu Zhongyu finished speaking, he handed over several Qinkuan bags to Du Xiaofu and said, President, these are the various spiritual herbs and refining materials that our World Society disciples and World Pavilion have collected during this period of time. According to your instructions, all of World Pavilion's profits have been used to collect spiritual herbs and refining materials. However, due to the external forces deliberately targeting us, the price of collecting spiritual herbs and refining materials has increased by quite a bit. In addition, the spiritual weapons and talisman weapons that you have refined are also very popular. Many people have come to buy them, but our World Pavilion has nothing to sell. After saying that, Gu Zhongyu took his leave. This is rather troublesome. Du Xiaofu kept the Chinku in bags and stayed in World Pavilion for a while before closing the door and leaving. After returning to Heaven Eye Peak, Du Xiaofu judged that his master, Elder Gu Qingyang, had not returned yet. Thus, he directly returned to his own nest. After a while, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in the misty space of the desolate ancient space. Looking at the small pagoda in his hand, he said in a gentle voice, "Brother Qingchun, are you here?" "Of course I'm here. Didn't you just go out? Why are you back?" At the same time, the mysterious runes on the small pagoda flickered. Like a mist, Jian Xingxuan's Yuan spirit body appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. As he gazed at those wretched eyes, a faint smile hung on Du Xiaofu's face. His voice was extremely pleasant to the ear as he said, "Brother Qingchun, I have some matters that I wish to discuss with you." Hearing this, Jian Xingxuan's extremely wretched gaze immediately tightly stared at Du Xiaofu's body under his inverted slanted eyebrows. His illusory black and white eyes rotated, revealing a suspicious expression as he asked, "Discuss? Discuss what?" Du Xiaofu chuckled and said, "It's nothing big. I just wish to discuss soul symbol masters with Brother Qingchun. I wonder what is the most attractive thing to a soul symbol master." "You've asked the right person." Jin Qingchun immediately acted like an old man. He stood with his hands behind his back, appearing extremely pleased with himself as he said, "There are many things that attract a soul symbol master. For example, a rare pill formula is extremely attractive to alchemy symbol masters. To an artifact symbol master, a top-notch artifact refining technique was extremely attractive. And for talisman formation masters, lost ancient talisman matrices are also extremely attractive." Du Xiaofu listened and understood very well. For example, Medicine King Yi Wuming and Deputy Dean Zhuge Qiangbong were deeply fascinated by weapon refining methods and puppet refining methods. Is there anything that can attract all soul symbol masters at the same time? Du Xiaofu asked Jin Qingchun. At the same time, the things that can attract soul symbol masters are naturally heavenly treasures and elixirs that can enhance spiritual soul power, Jin Qingchun said. How could these questions stump him? Treasures of heaven and earth that can strengthen one's spiritual soul power can only be found by chance, but there are many pills that can strengthen one's spiritual soul power. Although they are expensive, it is not too difficult for those talisman masters with high cultivation and talent to obtain some pills that can strengthen one's spiritual soul power. Du Xiaofu thought in his heart. For a soul symbol master in a huge sect like the Ancient Sky Sect, it was absolutely not too difficult to obtain some elixirs that could enhance spiritual soul power. There are many kinds of elixirs that can enhance spiritual soul power, but their effects are not the same. Especially for soul symbol masters, the higher their cultivation, the more difficult it is to find great elixirs that can enhance spiritual soul power. I have several high-grade elixir recipes that have special effects in enhancing spiritual soul power. However, you don't need them. Your spiritual soul power is already very strong. Taking elixirs to enhance it is appropriate, but it will not be good if it is too much. Jin Qingchun looked at Du Xiaofu and said proudly and confidently, "In addition to the medicinal pill that strengthens the mind and soul, there is another thing that is fatally attractive to all spirit talisman masters. It is even more attractive than the medicinal pill that strengthens the mind and soul. If it wasn't for the fact that your foundation is already so strong that I can't continue to strengthen it, I would have used it on you long ago." "What is it?" Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's interest was immediately piqued. He stared intently at Jin Qingchun and asked, "I have already used it on you. Have you forgotten?" Jin Qingchun glanced at Du Xiaofu and asked, "Could it be?" Du Xiaofeng pondered and suddenly thought of something. He said to Jin Qingchun, "Spiritual root. You were talking about spiritual root?" "Yes, spiritual root. For soul symbol masters, the most important things are spiritual soul power and spiritual root. I thought your spiritual root was poor, so I specially refined some elixirs to enhance your spiritual root. But in the end, I found that your spiritual root was really strong. It was just sealed by someone, and I did not use it later. However, for any spiritual talisman master, even if it's an outstanding spiritual talisman master, a human king, or a human emperor, as long as it can strengthen their spiritual roots by a little, it's a fatal temptation. A smile appeared on Zhang Qingchuan's face. He knew very well what it meant for a soul symbol master to be able to enhance his spiritual root. Spiritual root. Enhance spiritual root. I actually forgot. Damn it, haha. Du Xiaofu laughed happily. A big stone in his heart fell to the ground. Being able to enhance one's spiritual root was very attractive to all soul symbol masters. Brother Qingchun, are there many refining methods of elixirs that can enhance spiritual root outside? After a while, Du Xiaofu seemed to have thought of something and immediately asked Jin Qingchun. After all, the ancient sky sect was such a big sect, so its foundation was definitely not simple. Humph, do you think it's easy to strengthen one's spiritual root? I can tell you that there are only a handful of people in the entire Central Plains who know how to strengthen one's spiritual root. Even if they knew, they would never reveal the refining method. Jin Qingchun said firmly and conceitedly. Thinking of how many top experts had queued up in front of him to ask for the refining method to enhance spiritual root, there were definitely not many people in the world who had the refining method of elixirs and elixirs to enhance spiritual root, and he was one of them. I can only update 4 times today. I cooked dinner and chatted for a while, but I only updated 4 times now. Xiao Yu will continue to work hard tomorrow. Sorry, everyone. Chapter 691. Then there's no problem. Du Xiaofu smiled. With a way to strengthen the spirit root, World Pavilion's current situation would be alleviated. You suddenly asked about this. Did you run into any problems? Jin Qingchun looked at Du Xiaofu. He felt that this kid must have something on his mind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so humble and eager to learn. This little thought couldn't escape his eyes. Hee, Du Xiaofu smiled. Then, he told Jin Qingchun about World Pavilion's situation. I see. It's not difficult to get spiritual talisman masters to join us. The prescription I gave you to strengthen your spirit root was the most ordinary one. Many of the spiritual herbs were just substitutes. Now, I'll tell you the real prescription and a few other prescriptions to strengthen your mind and soul. When the time comes, it shouldn't be difficult to get some spiritual talisman masters to join us. Jin Qingchun said to Du Xiaofu. Then, he gave Du Xiaofu the prescription to strengthen his spirit root and a few prescriptions to strengthen his mind and soul. Du Xiaofu started refining in the ancient barren space. This time, Gu Zhongyu and the rest had gathered a lot of spiritual herbs. There were only a few high-grade prescriptions to strengthen one's mind and soul. However, they lacked a few rare spiritual herbs. They would have to go out and buy them. At night, the twilight was dim. The setting sun was like blood. Above the mountain peaks, the setting sun was like a golden halo. The light was so bright that it pierced people's eyes. It was like a dream. That kid severely injured and Chongqing with one move. It was just one move. He didn't hold back at all. In front of the hall on the mountain peak, under the setting sun, Protector House said to a 7 feet tall burly man standing in front of him. There was some shock in his eyes. The burly man stood with his hands behind his back. His hair and clothes were fluttering in the wind. On his handsome face, there was some light fluctuating in his glass-like eyes. He was not angry, but he was majestic. He opened his mouth and said that Chongqing should be at the Nirvana realm of the Martial King realm. Looks like Xiaofu's strength has increased again after breaking through to the Martial King realm. I heard that Chongqing Hai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen have joined forces to deal with Du Xiaofu. Protector Hao looked at Sima Taxing's back with some worry in his eyes. Master, do you think we should intervene? If things get out of hand, I'm afraid. The ancient heaven sect has been peaceful for too long, and some people are getting bolder and bolder. Some things need to change. Chongqing Hai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen are probably just the vanguard. We don't need to worry about them. Sima Taxing Star looked at the setting sun in the distant mountains. He slowly turned around and said to Protector Hao, the Manchu doesn't need to get involved in this matter for now. When the time comes, some people will naturally intervene. I understand. Protector Hao nodded and said nothing more. He turned around and left. Berserk Pill, Xinyuan Pill, Talisman Weapon infused with Beast Energy, Dual Cultivation of Martial Arts and Talisman, Talisman Master, Talisman Master, Talisman Master, Talisman Master, and Talisman Master. Boy, it seems that I have underestimated you. Sima Taxing Star turned around and looked at the distant mountains again. The last trace of the setting sun fell on the other side of the mountains, merging with the outline of the mountains. He murmured, "Let's see what other skills you have. If you can really pry open a hole in some deep-rooted things, then I will really have to thank you. Let's see if you have the ability." As night fell, the ancient and majestic mountains were lined up next to each other under the backdrop of the night, like a black dragon coiling in the sky. In the sky, there were rows of twinkling stars. They were like luminous pearls embedded in the vast sky. Among the densely packed peaks, there was an extremely steep peak. In the courtyard, a dozen figures were sitting. A dozen young men who looked to be around 25 or 26 years old sat upright. Each of them had an extraordinary bearing and were outstanding talents. The aura that unknowingly spread out from the dozen or so young men in a daze was sufficient to cause those who did not possess sufficient cultivation to tremble. The three young men at the front had the most powerful auras. They were all around 25 or 26 years old. One of them was dressed in green. His eyes were glowing, and his figure was tall and slender. One of them was burly and had short hair. He gave off a beast-like feeling. The last one was dressed in a white brocade robe. His black hair was slightly tied up, and his eyes were like the stars. If these three people walked in the ancient heaven sect, they would be enough to make many disciples scream. Chang Qinghai, the leader of the 400 sects, Fei Qingming, the leader of the Yunji Association, and Bai Yichen, the leader of the Forgotten Dust sect, were ranked 10th, 9th, and 8th on the gold ranking. Any one of these three people was the object of admiration of many female disciples in the ancient heaven sect. Even outside of the ancient heaven sect, he had a great reputation. And Chongqing, were you seriously injured by Du Xiaofu in one move? Bai Yichen, who was dressed in a white brocade robe and had his black hair tied up, asked in Chongqing, who was sitting weakly on the chair with a pale face. That brat is very strange. When I wasn't paying attention, he used a mental energy soul attack. Otherwise, he wouldn't have defeated me. And Chongqing's voice burst out from between his teeth, his face pale. His eyes were filled with resentment. Under the attack of that soul force, he had no power to resist and was severely injured. Now, the whole sect was laughing about him after dinner. A loss is a loss. Why do you have so many excuses? If it was a battle of life and death, you would be a dead man now. The burly Fei Qingming said in a deep voice. He glanced at Chongqing and said, "It seems that Du Xiaofu is quite capable. He won't be easy to deal with. We underestimated him." Hearing Fei Qingming's words, Chongqing's gaze wavered. He was somewhat unconvinced. Chongqing opened his mouth slightly, but he didn't say anything in the end. Instead, the resentment in his eyes intensified. Chang Qinghai, who was dressed in green and hadn't said anything, frowned slightly. Then, his eyes flickered as he looked at Bai Yichen and Fei Qingming. "Are we going to let that brat go?" "Haha, let that brat go?" Fei Qingming smiled faintly. "That brat is a newcomer. Relying on his little bit of strength and his relationship with Elder Gu Qingyang, he's indeed domineering. In the ancient heaven sect, we'll just turn a blind eye to it. It's all that brat's fault. There are some things in the ancient heaven sect that he can't touch easily." Fei Qingming smiled faintly, but there were some things in the sect that he couldn't touch. That brat won't be easy to deal with. He should be a tough nut to crack. A faint smile appeared on Bai Yichen's handsome face. Chang Qinghai's face darkened slightly. He suddenly stood up and sneered. "So what if he's a tough nut to crack? We'll just smash him to pieces. He's just asking for trouble. How can a small world gathering compete with us? What should we do now? Since he dared to touch our people, we can't just let him go." Chang Qinghai's eyes flickered with coldness. Although Du Xiaofu is strong, and Chongqing was severely injured by his talisman master attack, if it's a head-on confrontation, that brat won't be much stronger. Since he dared to make a move, we won't be polite. Let's smash that tough nut to crack. Fei Qingming said in a deep voice. Then let's do it. We'll let those rookies know that we can't be compared to those fellows on the bronze leaderboard, even though we had an advantage in the giant rock space. Chang Qinghai said in a deep voice. Then, a dozen extraordinary youths flicked their sleeves and left, each with a sneer on their faces. By the time Du Xiaofu left the ancient desolate space, He had already been inside for a few days. However, it was still early in the morning outside. Early in the morning, after dawn, the morning light poured down on the earth and a cool breeze blew gently. Heaven Peak was surrounded by clear water, high mountains, and a blue sky. The scenery was picturesque and moving. Crack! Du Xiaofu stretched his body. His joints crackled like firecrackers, revealing a sense of power. President, it's not good. The world gathering, it's not good. A hurried voice sounded from the bottom of the mountain. Several figures hurriedly leaped up the mountain and appeared in front of Du Xiaofu. Zhang Yingwen, Wang Mingqiao, what's wrong? Du Xiaofu naturally recognized the people in front of him. They were the inner sect disciples of the ancient sky sect from the World Society. Chapter 692. Yesterday, Du Xiaofu told everyone that if anything happened in World Pavilion, they were to look for him directly. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's expression darkened when he saw how anxious and pale these people were. Some of them even had blood dripping from their mouths. He seemed to have guessed something. President, something happened. Something big happened. A tall and skinny young man came forward. It was Zhang Yingwen, an inner sect disciple. He looked at Du Xiaofu and took a deep breath. After calming himself down, he said with a worried expression, President, the Four Seas sect, Yunzhi, Forgotten Dust sect, and a dozen other powers rushed into World Pavilion early in the morning. They destroyed World Pavilion and injured many of our people. They even captured junior brother Gu Zhangyu and many other disciples. They said that they want you to go to Heaven Marshal Plaza to pick them up. If not, they won't go easy on you. Go to Heaven Marshal Plaza. Du Xiaofu frowned slightly. His voice turned cold and his eyes narrowed. A cold light flashed across his eyes. President, some of our people are badly injured. They didn't show any mercy. They almost killed us. Wang Mingqiao gritted his teeth and said, Many of the World Club's disciples were badly injured. It was a horrible sight. Four Seas sect, Yunzhi, Forgotten Dust sect. Du Xiaofu's expression darkened. He clenched his fists, and the veins on his fists popped out. President, what should we do now? Forgotten Dust sects by Yi Chen, Yunzhi's Fei Qingming, and Four Seas sects Chong Qinghai are all there. There are also many experts on the gold ranking. They are very strong. Zhang Yingwen asked. Du Xiaofu looked at the sky in front of him with a cold look in his eyes. Then, he said to Zhang Yingwen, Wang Mingqiao and the others, you guys go back and take care of the injured disciples. I will go to the Sky Marshal Square first. President, we'll go with you. They have a lot of people. Wang Mingqiao was worried. The number of people from those dozen or so factions added together was enormous. As the saying went, it was difficult for two hands to fight against four fists. He was worried that the president would suffer a great loss. Moreover, Chong Qinghai and the others were experts in the top 10 of the alchemy rankings. No need. You guys go take care of the injured first. I'll be right back. It won't take too long. Du Xiaofu waved his hand and said, All right, then be careful, President. Zhang Yingwen nodded. He knew the president's strength. Even if they followed him, they would only be a burden. After that, several people left and rushed to the World Pavilion to take care of the other heavily injured people. Looks like it's time for me to stretch my muscles. Clearly, the intimidation I gave him yesterday wasn't enough. Looking in the direction of the Sky Marshal Plaza, Du Xiaofu muttered softly. A cold and baleful aura flashed across his resolute face. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, Du Xiaofu turned into a ray of light and flew towards the Tianwu Square. The vast Tianwu Plaza was bustling with noise and excitement early in the morning. After a while, more and more spectators gathered from all directions. Whispers could be heard from the dense crowd of disciples. I heard that the Four Seas sect, Cloud Society, Forgotten Dust sect, and more than 10 other forces have joined forces to deal with the World Society. Marshal Uncle Du heavily injured and Chongqing of the Four Seas sect yesterday. Today, they're here for revenge. Naturally, they won't let this matter rest. Senior brother Chong Qinghai, senior brother Fei Qingming, and senior brother Bai Yichen are all here. They're all ranked in the top 10 of the gold ranking. I'm afraid that Marshal Uncle Du is in danger this time. The World Society's World Pavilion has recently stolen business from other shops because of the Berserk Pill and Profound Essence Pill. The 4C's sect has joined forces with them. It's obvious that they're targeting the World Pavilion. Marshal Uncle Do isn't someone to be trifled with. Otherwise, he wouldn't have heavily injured senior brother and Chongqing in one move yesterday. There's going to be a good show to watch now. Whispers rang out around the Tianwu Plaza. Everyone gathered together and started to clamor. The disciples who were watching the show spread the news, causing more and more spectators to gather at the Tianwu Plaza. It was like a grand occasion for the ancient heaven sect. It didn't take long for the black mass of heads to occupy the periphery of the Tianwu Plaza. On the Tianwu Plaza, a huge lineup of nearly 1,000 people stood there with provocative sneers on their faces. They had captured Gu Zhongyu and the other disciples of the World Society and mocked them. Little rookies, you dare to run amok in the ancient heaven sect? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. A bunch of reckless fools. You'll suffer in the future. If Du Xiaofu doesn't come later, you'll suffer. I'm afraid that Du Xiaofu has already peed his pants. How would he dare to come? Ha 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 ha. Don't worry, everyone. The president will definitely seek justice for us. The humiliation we suffered, the president will definitely fucking return 10 times over. Amidst the ridicule, Gu Zhongyu said to the disciples of the World Society, who were covered in scars and weak auras. In front of the crowd, there were more than a dozen extraordinary youths standing silently. The 3 youths in the front were especially outstanding, attracting many respectful gazes around the Tianwu Plaza. Many of the female disciples among the spectators were even more moved, and ripples appeared in their eyes. Looking at the rippling eyes of the female disciples, Zhou Yinger stood beside the dozen youths and enjoyed the envious gazes of many girls. Qi, qi, qi. Suddenly, Bai Yiqian, Fei Qingming, and Chang Qinghai raised their heads and looked at the sky almost at the same time. Whoosh! The sound of wind breaking resounded, and a long figure swept across the sky from afar. Is Du Xiaofu here? Uncle Master Du wouldn't have come alone, right? Soon after, numerous pairs of eyes around the Tianwu Square lifted their heads and looked towards the sky. Qi. Under everyone's gazes, a golden figure descended from the sky. The golden light receded, and a purple-robed youth who looked to be 17 or 18 years old appeared in the center of the plaza. The purple-robed youth carried a purple cloth wrapped around his back, but it was a broadsword that had never appeared before. His resolute and determined face was rather cold at this moment. It's Uncle Master Du. He came alone. I didn't expect Du Xiaofu to have the guts to come, and he even came alone. After a few breaths of silence, whispers could be heard everywhere. It's the president. The president is here to help us. Gu Zhongyu and the other captured disciples of the World Society saw the purple-robed youth, and their dispirited faces immediately became excited. Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, Bai Yiqian, and many others also looked at Du Xiaofu and began to size up Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu landed, and his gaze swept across the crowd and finally fell on the imprisoned Gu Zhongyu and the other disciples of the World Society. With a flash of coldness in his eyes, Du Xiaofu raised his head slightly and strode forward to where Gu Zhongyu and the others were imprisoned. Looking at Du Xiaofu slowly walking over, the thousands of disciples looked at each other in dismay. When they saw the purple-robed youth step forward, their hearts trembled for no reason. Stop, or I won't go easy on you. An extraordinary youth plucked up his courage, straightened his body, and berated Du Xiaofu in a deep voice. His body blocked in front of Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu ignored him and strode forward without any fear. He didn't even bother to look at the youth. Brat, you're too arrogant. The youth was enraged, and he couldn't keep his face. He shouted and waved his hand, releasing his mysterious qi. The aura of a 6-star mysterious realm cultivation was released. The air trembled, and the mysterious runes wrapped around it flashed and blasted towards Du Xiaofu. Get lost, Du Xiaofu shouted. Without any pleasantries, he flipped his palm. Just as the youth was about to attack, a fist print landed on the chest of the extraordinary youth with lightning speed. Bang! A low muffled sound, like muffled thunder. The extraordinary youth of the mysterious realm of Martial King was immediately sent flying like a kite with a broken string. A large mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. The youth's body heavily fell over 100 feet away. Huff, huff. The surroundings were quiet, and almost everyone's eyes were trembling. It seemed that no one had expected Du Xiaofu to directly attack. Du Xiaofu alone faced more than a dozen forces and 3 experts who were currently ranked in the top 10 of the gold roll. It was beyond everyone's expectations. You still dare to attack? Let's join forces and take care of this brat. After a short period of silence, loud shouts came from the thousands of people from the dozens of forces. Waves of aura swept out, and the weakest force was at the Martial Marquis realm. The aura of many Martial King realm experts swept out, like a storm sweeping in all directions. Attack! Take care of this kid. Rumble. In a short period of time, the waves of Martial King realm aura and terrifying aura rippled. Dozens of people had already attacked Du Xiaofu one after another. Boom! At this moment, Du Xiaofu's body was covered in a dazzling golden light. He no longer held back the aura of a Martial King realm expert. It swept out like a hurricane. On his gloomy face, his eyes were covered in golden light. It was as if a golden-winged rock was about to fly out. Oscillating fist, stormy waves palm, sky-shaking wings, mysterious soul eye, rock chaos shattering claw. The series of low sonic booms resounded in the square. Golden light bloomed, and the energy swept out. Ah! Screams of agony rang out from the crowd, wailing miserably. Body after body was thrown out like stones and heavily smashed onto the ground. All of them cried out miserably and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Chapter 693. Du Xiaofu charged into the crowd like a ferocious beast. Strength was everything, and the ancient heaven sect was no exception. The world pavilion was destroyed, and his world society members were captured. Du Xiaofu was truly enraged. Only by making these people fear him would they not dare to provoke him in the future. Boom! Du Xiaofu's body was covered in golden light. His aura was as strong as a sovereign beast. He stepped forward, and with every move he made, golden light shot out. His attacks were like cannons. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was like a giant tiger charging into a flock of sheep. The ancient heaven sect disciples could not dodge at all. Their ribs and chests were broken by Du Xiaofu's attacks. Their internal organs were shaken, and they vomited blood. This was a shocking scene, and the surrounding people were all aghast. Du Xiaofu's strength was too terrifying. No one had expected Du Xiaofu to be so strong. Bang! Du Xiaofu's punch landed on the lower abdomen of a martial emperor realm cultivator in the blink of an eye. As the punch landed, a golden glow was emitted, and the young man's body was sent flying over 100 feet away, while he let out a miserable cry. Crack! In the next second, the shoulder of another young man who had just reached the Martial King realm was caught by Du Xiaofu's left hand. Du Xiaofu tore the young man's arm with all his might. The bones in the young man's arm cracked, and the young man's arm was covered with blood. A large piece of flesh was torn out of the young man's shoulder. Golden Xian Qi surged out, and a domineering aura exploded. Du Xiaofu was completely enraged this time. His body was covered in a faint golden light. The domineering aura swept out, causing people to tremble. Bang bang! In the blink of an eye, another 2 young men who had not regained their senses were sent flying. They could not get up anymore. Although there were thousands of people surrounding Du Xiaofu, there were less than 20 to 30 people who could actually get close to him. With their cultivation, they could not even break through Du Xiaofu's defense. They were not a threat to Du Xiaofu at all. Attack together. Use talisman weapons and Dao weapons. Many young men shouted. The stronger young men regained their senses and panicked. They moved together and formed a new round of attacks. The remaining thousands of young men moved together, and a terrifying Xian Qi weapon swept out. Some people had already summoned their talisman weapons and Dao weapons. Instantly, blade lights, sword lights, and rod lights raged through the sky, and they interweaved into large expanses of dense talisman markings that enveloped down towards Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu raised his head. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he sneered. With a wave of his hand, a red and green light burst forth as he activated Tyrannical Shadow. Rays of sword light swept out like a giant pung soaring through the sky or a spirit snake soaring through the sky. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Under such a terrifying attack, the surrounding space was directly cut open. Large amounts of spatial ripples were instantly shattered into pieces. The entire Sky Marshal Square shook and was about to crack. Flower-splitting willow, yang past 3 stacks, whirlwind clouds, violent sword gale. With Overlord Shadow in hand, Du Xiaofu activated the Bright Saint Sword Manual. His eyes were calm and fearless. Coldness radiated in all directions. Golden talisman runes surged out from all over his body. Du Xiaofu was surrounded by a dense group of people, and his aura became even more terrifying. He was like a fierce beast that had awakened from a deep slumber. The disciples of the ancient Sky sect were very strong. Each of them was a dragon or phoenix among men. However, Du Xiaofu was even stronger and looked down on his peers. More importantly, Du Xiaofu, who had fought his way out of the dark forest, could even control the dark forest in his hands. His fierce aura was something that few people of the same generation in the ancient Sky sect could compare to. In terms of ruthlessness, how many people of the same generation in the ancient Sky sect could compare to Du Xiaofu? If these youths knew of Du Xiaofu's fierce reputation in the dark forest, they would have hesitated before making a move. In comparison, Du Xiaofu, who had walked out of the dark forest, was definitely a strong dragon. At best, they could only be considered local snakes. Although it was said that a strong dragon could not suppress a local snake, if they really fought, the outcome could be imagined. Ah! Miserable cries rang out incessantly. The Sky Marshal Square was dripping with blood. Many spirit tools and talisman tools had fallen to the ground. Many youths were lying on the ground, screaming and struggling. Puff, puff, puff. In just a few blinks of an eye, the spirit tools in the hands of hundreds of youths were broken. Some talisman tools fell to the ground. All of them spat out blood and fell to the ground. It was a tragic sight. Roar. Someone activated his pulse soul and roared ferociously with a terrifying aura. Sky-shaking wings. Rock chaos-shattering claw. With the pulse soul in the sky, Du Xiaofu was fearless. It was as if there was no one in the sky. He raised his hand and tore the huge pulse soul shadows into pieces. Those terrifying huge demonic beast pulse souls were stunned in front of Du Xiaofu. Their eyes were filled with fear and their bodies were trembling. They could not withstand a single blow. How can he be so strong? Everyone was shocked. How strong was Du Xiaofu? Despite being besieged by thousands of people, Du Xiaofu seemed to be unstoppable as he charged into the crowd and destroyed everything like a hot knife through butter. How tyrannical, fierce, and valiant was this? So strong. Martial Uncle Du is simply abnormal. This is no longer a normal person. He is a demonic beast supreme. Everyone was shocked. Looking at the experts from the dozens of forces and thousands of people besieging Du Xiaofu, they could not even touch the corner of Du Xiaofu's clothes. At this moment, they truly knew how powerful Du Xiaofu was. Looking at the scene in the square, Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen were also shocked. Perhaps it was only at this moment that the three of them truly understood just how tyrannical the rumored Du Xiaofu was. Stop, back off, back off. Fei Qingming shouted. The square was drenched in blood, and the disciples were scattered everywhere. The miserable cries of the people in the square made him realize that he could not continue besieging. If that happened, more people would be seriously injured. Back off, back off. All the disciples were scared and immediately retreated. Their eyes were filled with fear as they retreated behind Fei Qingming and the others. Each of them looked at the purple-robed youth in front of them with trembling eyes. Swish! Many spiritual weapons and talisman weapons on the ground were forcefully taken by Du Xiaofu. He did not hesitate to put them into his Qinkuan bag. He had no intention of returning them. Wherever Du Xiaofu passed, he stepped on the youths one by one. These youths were dragons and phoenixes among men. They were heaven's pride in the outside world, and the geniuses of the ancient heaven sect. But now, They were being mercilessly trampled under Du Xiaofu's feet. At this moment, what was being trampled on was the ignorance and arrogance of these youths. Everything was being trampled into nothingness. The surroundings fell into a strange silence again. Everyone's eyes fell on the purple-robed youth. He attracted the attention of all the onlookers around the square. More than a dozen forces had joined forces and thousands of people. At this moment, 1/3 of them were in a sorry state. At least 200 people were struggling on the ground. Blood was dripping, and only endless screams could be heard. Everyone could see that although these people's lives were not in danger, they would not be able to get up for at least a year. This was especially true for those who were more severely injured. Their future cultivation would most likely be greatly affected. Du Xiaofu's actions were clean and swift. His fierceness and domineering was shocking. Du Xiaofu kept the tyrant shadow in his body as he passed by. He arrived in front of Gu Zhangyu and the others, who were trembling with excitement. He undid the restrictions on them and said, "Your humiliation and theirs must be washed away with blood. President is mighty. President is mighty." Gu Zhangyu and the others said in unison. Their eyes were trembling and moist. The world society was not to be bullied by anyone. "You are Du Xiaofu." A gloomy voice sounded as many people slowly walked over. Du Xiaofu turned around and saw more than a dozen extraordinary youths walking over. Their expressions were not good, and their faces were ashen. Especially the 3 youths in front. Their auras were even more powerful. Complete Martial King realm. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved slightly as he felt the faint aura around the 3 youths. There were also several Martial King realm and Nirvana realm cultivators behind them. He already had a rough idea of their origins. "President, those 3 people are Chang Qinghai from the 4C sect, Fei Qingming from the Yunji Association, and Bai Yiqian from the Forgotten Dust sect. There are also a few experts on the gold roll. Many of the others are from their batch." Gu Zhangyu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said softly to Du Xiaofu. His eyes were filled with anger. "All of you, step back. I will take care of everything." Du Xiaofu waved his hand and signaled Gu Zhangyu and the rest to step back. Once the fight started, they would not even have the strength to be affected. "President, be careful." Gu Zhangyu knew that they would only be a burden if they stayed, so he immediately stepped back with the rest behind him. "Kid, I asked you a question. Are you deaf? Are you Du Xiaofu from the World Society?" Fei Qingming stared at Du Xiaofu with a pale face. Hundreds of disciples were severely injured in front of him. If he did not take care of Du Xiaofu today, he would probably become a joke in the ancient heaven sect in the future. Noisy. Du Xiaofu glanced at Fei Qingming. When he finished speaking, his figure was like a golden afterimage. He pounced on Fei Qingming like lightning and took the initiative to attack. "You're courting death." Fei Qingming's eyes suddenly twitched. As the 9th on the gold roll, how could he be weak? He was an outstanding talent and ranked 9th on the gold roll. How magnificent was Fei Qingming? Almost at the same time as Du Xiaofu's figure pounced, Fei Qingming's figure also pounced on him like a beast pouncing on its prey. Tianming fist. A low roar came from Fei Qingming's mouth. The aura on his body suddenly became violent and ferocious, like a sleeping beast that had just woken up. Chapter 694. At the same time, Du Xiaofu appeared in front of Fei Qingming. Lightning flashed in his cold eyes, and his purple robe fluttered in the wind. An overbearing aura spread out from his body. Roar! A roar that sounded like the roar of a dragon and the trumpeting of a divine elephant could be heard. The mysterious runes on Du Xiaofu's hand rippled and turned into countless palm prints. In the end, they condensed into a single palm print. Along with the mysterious runes, the palm print slashed through the air and violently collided with Fei Qingming's fist. Bang! The collision was accompanied by the sound of wind and thunder. The muffled sound of energy was like thunder. Walala! Terrifying energy ripples swept out like a hurricane. The terrifying aura caused the surrounding spectators to feel fear and trepidation even from afar. Ding ding! In the midst of the terrifying aura, Fei Qingming's burly body staggered back. His face turned pale, and he only managed to stabilize his body after retreating a dozen steps. His fists were numb, and he stood with his hands behind his back. His 5 fingers were slightly bent and his eyes were filled with shock. Ding ding. The violent energy swept out and Du Xiaofu's body also staggered back a dozen steps. His face also turned pale. The consumption of the mysterious technique was too shocking. Although the celestial qi in the God's Gate was dense, the consumption of the mysterious technique was shocking. It's a tie, as the 2 people in the arena separated from each other and retreated at the same time. The spectators were even more shocked. Du Xiaofu and Fei Qingming were actually evenly matched. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Fei Qingming, who was ranked 9th on the gold roll, actually couldn't gain any advantage over Du Xiaofu. What a powerful technique. This isn't the ancient heaven sect's technique. This person is really strong. In the crowd, Chang Qinghai, Bai Yichen and the others were also shocked. Seeing Fei Qingming stagger back step by step, at this moment, no one dared to underestimate Du Xiaofu. So strong. Many disciples couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. How could a person who could fight Fei Qingming to a draw be an ordinary person? Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. Fei Qingming, who had reached the Martial King realm, was indeed powerful. No wonder he was ranked in the top 10 on the alchemy list. The complete Martial King realm of the ancient heaven sect was a genius. Even the complete Martial King realm experts in the outside world were strong enough to fight against them. He had just broken through to the Martial King realm, and he was only able to fight evenly with Fei Qingming by relying on his increasingly refined and mysterious move. Du Xiaofu was not surprised. The Xian Qi in his divine watchtower was boundless and vigorous, but after all, there was a huge gap between the Martial King realm and the Martial King realm. Fei Qingming was not an ordinary person, and his strength was worthy of his name. Huff huff, as Fei Qingming's aura fluctuated, Chang Qinghai and Bai Yichen subconsciously stepped forward. The 3 of them formed a triangular formation, intentionally or unintentionally surrounding Du Xiaofu. The 3 auras faintly sealed Du Xiaofu within. Du Xiaofu raised his head, and there was a slight chill in his eyes. The 3 complete Martial King realm experts were indeed not easy to deal with. Haha, glancing at Fei Qingming, Chang Qinghai, and Bai Yichen, who were all complete Martial King realm experts, Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. After a slight chill, he controlled himself and laughed wildly. Along with his laughter, there was Xian Qi, and an invisible chill spread out. It was a domineering power that spread out from his bones, causing the surrounding area to suddenly become silent. Even the air seemed to have frozen. You want the 3 of you to come at me together? Fine, then come at me. Raising his head, Du Xiaofu coldly looked at Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen, who were all complete Martial King realm experts. At this moment, there was a faint golden light in his eyes, and there was a bone-chilling coldness in them. This kid's aura is so terrifying. He's clearly only at the initial Martial King realm, but his aura is so strong. This guy's gaze is very vicious. It's sharp and frightening, like a ferocious beast. At this moment, as the chill spread out from Du Xiaofu's eyes, Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen, who were all complete Martial King realm experts, could also clearly feel a bone-chilling coldness seeping out from their bodies. The invisible chill spread out like a tide, and they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. The 3 of them looked at each other, and there was uncertainty in their eyes for a moment. The 3 of them were very clear that if they were to fight one-on-one, based on the strength that Du Xiaofu had just displayed, they might not be able to win. Even if they could win one-on-one, they would have to pay an extremely heavy price in the end. However, if the 3 of them really joined forces, they would not be able to put down their faces. If this spread out, even if they won, their reputation would not be good. The 3 powerhouses who were ranked in the top 10 on the gold leaderboard had joined forces to fight a new disciple. It was a bit of a slap in the face. Lively. It looks like it's really lively. At this moment, a calm voice was heard from the crowd in the distance. As soon as the voice was heard, there was an uproar in the crowd, and they automatically opened up a path. Then, a large group of people walked out of the crowd and walked to the square. There were only a dozen people in this group, but all of them had an arrogant look on their faces. The leader of this group was a young man in his mid-20s. He glanced at the crowd and intentionally or unintentionally, his gaze landed on Du Xiaofu. It was obvious that he was the one who had spoken earlier. It's the people from the Talisman Alliance. I didn't expect the people from the Talisman Alliance to be involved too. The Medicine Talisman Masters and Weapon Talisman Masters from the Four Seas Sect, Forgotten Dust Sect, and Yunji Association are all from the Talisman Alliance. It's not strange for them to be involved in this matter. With the arrival of these dozen people, there were many whispers in the surroundings. The Talisman Alliance was an extremely special organization in the Ancient Heaven Sect. Even the protectors and deacons couldn't control this organization, and they had to show some respect. At the very least, only the elders could slightly restrain them. This was because the Talisman Alliance was an organization formed by all the spiritual talisman masters in the Ancient Heaven Sect. There weren't many spiritual talisman masters among all the cultivators. The Ancient Heaven Sect only had a total of about 100,000 disciples, and it was said that there were only a few hundred spiritual talisman masters. Among them, there were even many martial Dao and talisman Dao cultivators. The proportion of spiritual talisman masters was far less than 1%, which showed how rare they were. There weren't many spiritual talisman masters among the elders of the Ancient Heaven Sect. The teachings of ordinary elders were naturally not very useful for spiritual talisman masters. There weren't many elders who were spiritual talisman masters, and they didn't have much time to teach some new spiritual talisman masters. Therefore, over time, a Talisman Alliance was formed in the Ancient Heaven Sect. The original purpose of the Talisman Alliance was for some senior spiritual talisman masters who had joined the sect earlier to guide the new spiritual talisman masters. After some development, the Talisman Alliance gradually developed into an organization that could almost control all the spiritual talisman masters in the Ancient Heaven Sect. The Talisman Alliance was within the Ancient Heaven Sect, but sometimes it could go beyond the Ancient Heaven Sect. As this group of people arrived, Fei Qingming looked at the leading youth with a smile on his face. The Talisman Alliance was a terrifying force in the Ancient Heaven Sect, and it had connections with almost all forces. It had a good relationship with many top experts among the Manchu's disciples, and even the protectors and elders of the Manchu. It could be said that in the Ancient Heaven Sect, except for a few particularly terrifying fellows and another group of forces controlled by the Terror Lord, the Talisman Alliance was the most difficult to provoke. Senior Chao, why are you here? Fei Qingming personally went up to greet him, and Chang Qinghai and Bai Yichin followed behind. They were extremely polite and respectful to the leading youth. The young man addressed as Senior Brother Chao by Fei Qingming had a thin figure. He wore a scholarly robe and had an extraordinary air about him. He had delicate features, but the slight smile in his eyes made one feel uncomfortable when looking at him. There was no one in the Tianwu Plaza who didn't know this person. Chao Zhao was currently ranked 7th on the gold ranking. Not only did he rely on the Talisman Alliance's influence, but he also relied on his own strength to earn the respect of everyone on the gold ranking. I heard that there was a show here, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect it to be so lively. Chao Zhao's eyes swept across the square and looked at the bloody and severely injured disciples around him. His eyes flickered slightly. Cousin, a delicate and soft voice sounded. Then, an extremely beautiful girl in her 20s came to Chao Zhao's side. She swayed in the wind, and her figure was curvy and exquisite. The girl had fair skin and a pair of bright and slender eyes. She had a classical oriental beauty and an extraordinary temperament. She was Zhou Yinger. As Chao Zhao's cousin, Zhou Yinger's talent in the Manchu wasn't the best, and she wasn't even an inner sect disciple yet. However, with her extraordinary beauty and her status as the cousin of the Talisman Alliance's Chao Zhao, Zhou Yinger could be said to get whatever she wanted among the sect's disciples. Even many inner sect disciples wanted to curry favor with her and curry favor with her. Only Du Xiaofu had humiliated her in front of everyone, putting her on the spot. She had never been humiliated like this before. Zhou Yinger had always harbored resentment in her heart. How could she let Du Xiaofu go? Even if Du Xiaofu was in the limelight recently and was the disciple of Elder Gu Qingyang, Zhou Yinger wasn't afraid at all, because her cousin was Chao Zhao of the Talisman Alliance. Just this point alone was enough. When Chao Zhao saw Zhou Yinger, he smiled and said, "Cousin, why are you here?" Today's update is still only 4 chapters. Brothers, rest early after reading. Chapter 695. I'm here to watch the show. I didn't expect cousin to be here too. Zhou Yinger softly said. Her voice caused those who heard it to feel numb. Her beautiful appearance and voluptuous body had indeed caused quite a number of youths in the surroundings to stare blankly at her. However, they did not dare to stare too obviously at her. Be careful when you watch the show. Don't hurt yourself. A faint smile appeared on Chao Zhao's face as he swept his gaze over the crowd. His gaze landed on Du Xiaofu from time to time. Then he said to Fei Qingming, Bai Yichen, and Chang Qinghai, looks like today's a lively day, ah? Senior Chao Zhao, please excuse us. Hearing this, Bai Yichen smiled bitterly. The 3 of them ganging up on Du Xiaofu was indeed a shameful thing. Since Senior Brother Chao is here, I ask Senior Brother Chao to uphold justice. Chang Qinghai stepped forward with a fawning look on his face. Then, he looked at Du Xiaofu, who was behind him. There was a cold glint in his eyes. This matter is related to the Talisman Alliance. Since I'm here, I can only interfere. Chao Zhao smiled and stepped forward. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, Are you Elder Gu Qingyang's disciple, Du Xiaofu? Complete 6-star Talisman Master. Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed slightly as he sensed the aura emanating from the young man's body. It was the aura of a perfect 6-star soul symbol master. The dozen or so people behind him were all extraordinary soul symbol masters. If these people were in the outside world, they would be respected by countless factions. Du Xiaofu did not answer Chao Zhao's question directly. He narrowed his eyes and asked, What is your position in the Manchu? Which elder do you belong to? As Du Xiaofu's voice fell, Chao Zhao's expression immediately became a little awkward. Everyone could hear Du Xiaofu's words. Du Xiaofu was Elder Gu Qingyang's disciple, and he could be considered the sect master's junior brother. Among the disciples of the ancient heaven sect, there were only a few who had a higher status than him. However, Chao Zhao regained his composure after a short while. He smiled and said to Du Xiaofu, Let me introduce myself. I'm Chao Zhao and I'm currently a member of the Talisman Alliance. Talisman Alliance? I've never heard of it. Du Xiaofu shook his head and said indifferently. Boy, you. A young talisman master behind Chao Zhao was furious, but Chao Zhao waved his hand to stop him. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, You haven't been in the Ancient Sky sect for long, so it's normal that you don't know about the Talisman Alliance. The Talisman Alliance is an organization for all talisman masters in the Ancient Sky sect. All talisman masters must follow the Talisman Alliance's rules within a certain range. Just say what you want to say. There's no need to be so long-winded. Du Xiaofu looked at Chao Zhao and said. Upon hearing this, Chao Zhao's eyebrows furrowed slightly. However, a smile quickly surfaced on his face. However, this smile seemed to contain some ridicule and a trace of chilliness. His eyes looked at the many blood-drenched disciples on the square as he said to Du Xiaofu, Isn't it a little overboard to be so heavy-handed between fellow disciples? However, it's impolite not to reciprocate. This is only the beginning, Du Xiaofu said in a deep voice. Chao Zhao's eyes moved. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, I already know about the matter between you and the Four Seas sect. Junior brothers Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichen have already told me in detail. It's said that the Xian Yuan pill and Berserk pill sold by your world pavilion are fake. This is no small matter, and it's also within the scope of my Talisman Alliance's supervision. Fake? Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. His lips curled into a sneer as he said, Where's the evidence? How can you prove that my world pavilion sells fake? I also don't believe that the world pavilion sells fake. However, my Talisman Alliance can't ignore the fact that some disciples have been harmed by fake. Chao Zhao looked at Du Xiaofu and sneered. Actually, it's very simple. The Xian Yuan pill and Berserk pill aren't pill formulas from the ancient heaven sect, so we can't guarantee their safety. As long as you hand over the Xian Yuan pill and Berserk pill formulas, our talisman masters will verify their authenticity. If there's no problem with the formulas, everything will be fine. Haha, Du Xiaofu laughed. Up until now, he finally understood that these guys were after the Xian Yuan pill and Berserk pill's pill formulas. What a good idea. Du Xiaofu, What are you laughing at? Chang Qinghai asked in a deep voice as he looked at Du Xiaofu's laughter. His 4C's sect's deputy leader, and Changqing, had been severely injured by a single move yesterday, causing the 4C sect to lose face. I'm laughing at the fact that you guys can put on a good show. Du Xiaofu stopped laughing and sneered. He looked at Xiao Zhao and the others and said, dream on if you want the Berserk pill and Xin Yuan pill formulas. You guys can't take them, and you don't have the ability to take them. Du Xiaofu's words immediately made Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, Bai Yiqin, Xiao Zhao and the others' faces turn green and red. Xiao Zhao frowned as a gloomy look flashed across his eyes. He then looked at Du Xiaofu and said slowly, the World Pavilion hasn't been established for long. The current situation is the best proof. Some new disciples should know their place in the Manchu and don't be too greedy. Otherwise, they won't even know how they're stuffed to death. Some things should be avoided as much as possible. Some so-called status is nothing in front of true strength. That's right. Some things are nothing in front of true strength. Du Xiaofu smiled coldly in response to Xiao Zhao's warning and threat. His purple robe fluttered as he said, for example, the Talisman League is nothing in front of me. Kid, you're too arrogant. The Talisman League isn't something that a kid like you can belittle. A well-dressed youth rushed out from behind Xiao Zhao. The aura of a 6-star Nirvana Realm Talisman Master surged out. He immediately formed a hand seal, and the surrounding energy began to fluctuate as he started to form a talisman array. Boom! In a short instant, the surrounding space trembled. The energy of the world around the young man fluctuated, and as runes flew about, 23 formation flags gathered in his hand. His rather cold and arrogant face turned pale. Walala! The well-dressed youth sneered as he threw out 23 formation flags. They immediately turned into 23 light pillars that shot up into the sky. They were about to form a huge 6-star Nirvana Realm Talisman Array. Once a 6-star Nirvana Realm Talisman Array was formed, it was enough to trap a Martial King Realm Complete Realm Cultivator. Even if he could forcefully break out of the array, he would have to pay a heavy price. At this moment, Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and many others sneered as they watched the well-dressed youth form a 6-star Nirvana Realm Talisman Array. These people from the Talisman League were definitely not easy to deal with. It was at this moment that Du Xiaofu made his move, as cold smiles appeared in the eyes of many. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Du Xiaofu's hand seals changed rapidly. Then, runes shot up into the sky like lightning and blocked the 23 formation light pillars. Whoosh, whoosh. The rune light in Du Xiaofu's hand seemed to have some kind of special effect. As the dazzling runes flickered, they actually directly dissolved the 23 rune light pillars, turning them into shattered runes. Finally, they collapsed into waves of energy and dissipated in the air. A dazzling rune light beam, with the force of a thunderbolt, directly hit the body of the young man in luxurious clothes. Before the well-dressed youth could react, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His originally pale face turned even paler at this moment. His eyes were filled with horror. Dissolve the runes, break the array, and counterattack. Xiao Zhao, Chang Qinghai, Bai Yiqin, Fei Qingming, and the others were all shocked. They could not help but exclaim. As disciples ranked in the top 10 of the gold ranking, Xiao Zhao and the rest were all experienced and knowledgeable. They were naturally able to tell that what Du Xiaofu had just done required an extremely deep understanding of symbol arrays to achieve such a feat. The well-dressed youth staggered back. After taking a few big steps, he stabilized his body. At this moment, he looked at Du Xiaofu with horror and shock in his eyes. You're overestimating yourself. I guess you're just a minor rune array. With your cultivation in rune arrays, although you can activate a 6-star Permethal level rune array, your understanding of rune arrays is not enough. It's better not to embarrass yourself in the future. It's not a big deal if you embarrass yourself, but it's a big deal if you embarrass the ancient heaven sect. Du Xiaofu looked at the young man in luxurious clothes before him. Even though he was already able to set up a 6-star Permethal level talisman array, he probably wasn't a talisman master who specialized in talisman arrays. His comprehension in talisman arrays wasn't much. This time, Du Xiaofu happened to understand some of the rune arrays in the ancient heaven sect in the ancient bronze space. Therefore, it was not too difficult for Du Xiaofu to break the array just now. He did not hold back and counterattacked. It would be difficult for the other party to recover in a short time. When he heard Du Xiaofu's words, it was unknown if it was because of the unrestrained mockery in Du Xiaofu's words, but the well-dressed young man actually opened his mouth again and spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. I didn't expect you to have such an understanding of rune arrays. You're really not weak. Chapter 696. I didn't expect you to be so proficient in talisman arrays. You're not weak. Qiao Zhao's expression did not look too good. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said in a low voice, however, "You sold fake medicine. No matter what, you must give an explanation. Otherwise, even if this matter reaches the sect, you will not be able to escape punishment." "That's easy. Come and get it from me." Under everyone's watchful eyes, Du Xiaofu took another 2 steps forward, looking directly at Qiao Zhao, Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yiqian. Du Xiaofu sneered as a tyrannical aura swept out from his body. "Why don't the 4 of you come at me together? Let's see if you can take away the compensation you want. As for you injuring my men and destroying my World Pavilion's venue, I'm going to take it back." Qiao Zhao frowned as he looked at Du Xiaofu and felt the domineering aura around Du Xiaofu. Suddenly, Qiao Zhao raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu. He sneered and said, "It seems like we can't settle this peacefully. This matter is related to pills and the Talisman Alliance. How about we settle it according to the Talisman Alliance's way? Come at me if you want to settle it." Du Xiaofu looked at Qiao Zhao and said calmly, "I heard that you made the Xinyuan pill and Berserk pill. You're also a Talisman Master. 3 days later, all the Talisman Masters will compete in the Talisman Alliance competition. The winner of the Talisman Master competition will become the leader of the Talisman Alliance. The winner of the Talisman Master competition and the winner of the Talisman Master competition will become the deputy leader of the Talisman Alliance. The 3 deputy leaders will control the entire Talisman Alliance and have the right to judge everything related to the Talisman Alliance. This is the power given to the Talisman Alliance by the Manchu." Qiao Zhao looked at Du Xiaofu and sneered, "Do you dare to take part in the competition 3 days later? If you can become the Talisman Master Champion of the Talisman League, I believe that no one will believe that your World Pavilion sells fake medicine. However, if you can't become the Talisman Master Champion, I believe that the 3 leaders of the Talisman League will definitely order you to hand over the recipes of the Xinyuan pill and Berserk pill to the Talisman League for verification. What do you think?" Hearing this, Du Xiaofu looked at Qiao Zhao, then swept his gaze across Bai Yiqian, Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming, and the others. A cold sneer suddenly appeared on his face as he said, "Good. This method is not bad, I agree." The corners of Qiao Zhao's mouth curled into a cold smile when he saw Du Xiaofu agree, and he said, "All right, we'll meet again at the Sky Marshal Square in 3 days." With these words, Qiao Zhao signaled with his eyes. The dozen or so spirit symbol masters behind him turned around and fiercely glared at Du Xiaofu. Then, they immediately left. "Take care of the injured. Let's go." Fei Qingming, Chang Qinghai, and Bai Yiqian ordered the people around them to help the seriously injured disciples. Then, they left. They had no objection to the Talisman Alliance's decision. The World Pavilion was in a mess. When Du Xiaofu brought Gu Zhangyu and the others back to World Pavilion, many World Society disciples came up to them. They looked angry and solemn. Du Xiaofu looked gloomy as he looked at the messy World Pavilion. After a while, on the 3rd floor of World Pavilion, Du Xiaofu learned about the Talisman Alliance from Gu Zhangyu, Wang Mingqiao, and the others. The Talisman Alliance had 3 leaders. According to tradition, the leader was always the Talisman Master. The 2 leaders were disciples of the Medicine Talisman Master and the Weapon Talisman Master respectively. The leader of the Talisman Alliance changed every year. Almost all of them were Talisman Masters on the gold roll. This time, the 3 leaders of the Talisman Alliance had retired. Therefore, the new leader would be chosen from the champion of the annual Talisman Alliance competition. President, the Talisman Alliance not only controls all the Talisman Masters in the Manchu, but more importantly, it controls the trade of cultivation resources in the Manchu. They even control a lot of cultivation resources. Why have the prices of the elixirs and refining materials increased so much recently? Apart from those forces working together to obstruct us, the biggest problem is the Talisman Alliance. If the Talisman Alliance interferes, I'm afraid we won't be able to collect elixirs and refining materials in the future, Gu Zhongyu said to Du Xiaofu. His pale face looked better after he consumed a healing elixir. The Talisman Alliance. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. The Talisman Alliance was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. They had great power and status in the Manchu. It's said that there are only 3 people who have the strongest claim to be the leader of the Talisman Alliance. For the Medicine Talisman Master, Chao Zhao is one of them. For the Weapon Talisman Master, it's Gu Zong, who's currently ranked 47th on the gold roll. Gu Zhongyu pursed his lips and continued to speak to Du Xiaofu. As for the Talisman Master, there's already a publicly recognized leader of the Talisman Alliance. It's Mi Zixia, who's ranked 3rd on the gold roll. Mi Zixia, ranked 3rd on the gold roll, Du Xiaofu murmured when he heard that. This name seemed to be able to bring an invisible impact to people. Wang Mingqiao said to Du Xiaofu, President, Mi Zixia isn't a simple person. He's an abnormal existence in the Manchu. He's a dual cultivator of martial arts and Talisman Dao. His attainments in Talisman Dao are extremely shocking. It's said that he had a great chance of becoming the leader of the Talisman Alliance in the last Talisman Dao competition. However, he withdrew from the competition because he wanted to cultivate in seclusion. This person is indeed not simple, Du Xiaofu sighed. To be able to disregard the position of the leader of the Talisman Alliance in order to cultivate, such a state of mind was enough to prove that he was extraordinary. Many of the World Society's disciples were injured. The World Pavilion was also smashed into a mess. After Du Xiaofu learned about the Talisman Alliance competition, he asked Gu Zhongyu and the rest to recuperate. He would talk about the World Pavilion after the Talisman Alliance competition. After leaving the World Pavilion, Du Xiaofu went to the Heaven Eye Peak to visit his 3rd senior brother, Yuanli. After learning that his master, Elder Gu Qingyang, was still outside and had not returned to the sect, he directly returned to his nest. After returning to his nest, Du Xiaofu entered the desolate ancient space. On that day, the ancient heaven sect was boiling with shock. Du Xiaofu had heavily injured more than 10 forces. Hundreds of disciples were beaten until they were riddled with scars and wails. When the news spread, it immediately shocked everyone. I didn't expect Martial Uncle Du to be so powerful. He's actually able to fight evenly with senior brother Fei Chengming. Fei Chengming is an expert ranked 9th on the gold roll. It seems like the 4 C's gang, Yunzhi and Forgotten Dust sect have kicked a stone this time. It's said that Martial Uncle Du will participate in the Talisman Alliance competition 3 days later. At night, the sky was filled with stars. The moon was dark and the stars were bright. Good boy, you're quite ruthless. Inside the main hall, Sima Taxing smiled and stood with his hands behind his back. His glassy eyes were filled with ripples. No one knew what he was thinking. That brat is quite ruthless. According to the disciples, the 4 C's gang, Yunzhi and Forgotten Dust sect were no match for him. They were beaten to a pulp even after being surrounded by more than 1,000 people. They were crying for their parents. Protector Hao, who had been standing next to Sima Taxing, smiled wryly before revealing a worried expression. 2 fists couldn't fight 4 hands. He couldn't help but worry for Du Xiaofu. He said, Fei Qingming, Bai Yichen, and Chang Qinghai definitely won't let this go. Elder Gu Qingyang isn't in the Manchu either. I'm worried that Du Xiaofu will suffer alone. Suffer, haha, Sima Taxing smiled and said, if there is such a thing as suffering, then that brat has already suffered today. If he didn't suffer today, then he can only take advantage in the future. Chang Qinghai, Fei Qingming and Bai Yichen. Sigh, I thought that they would be a bit more outstanding, but it seems that they are only SOSO. They are much weaker than that brat. They shouldn't be weak. Even though Du Xiaofu and Fei Qingming were evenly matched, I'm afraid that brat won't be able to contend with Chang Qinghai and Bai Yichen in a real fight. Protector Hao slightly frowned. According to his speculation, Du Xiaofu was very strong, abnormally strong. However, Fei Qingming, Bai Yichen, and Chang Qinghai were definitely not weak either. I'm not talking about strength, I'm talking about something else. Sima Taxing said with a smile on his handsome face. What do you mean? Protector Hao was puzzled and asked. Sima Taxing smiled and said, Chongqing Hai, Fei Qingming, and Bai Yichin are tigers raised in a greenhouse. They usually deal with chickens, ducks, fish, and rabbits. Naturally, they are kings. After a pause, Sima Taxing raised his head and sighed slightly, saying, But my junior fellow apprentice is a wild wolf. I don't know where Marshal Uncle Gu Qingyang found a real wild wolf. Once they are placed outside, I'm afraid that these tigers in a greenhouse will be eaten until even their bones can't be kept. Hearing this, Protector Hao suddenly stopped talking with a wry smile on his face. After a while, he said to Sima Taxing, Master, Du Xiaofu will also participate in the Talisman League competition 3 days later. What do you think the final result will be? Chao Ji is stronger than Chongqing Hai, Bai Yichin, and Fei Qingming. In contrast, Chao Ji is a snake, a poisonous boa. Sima Taxing said with a smile. Protector Hao smiled and said to Sima Taxing, Master, a wild wolf can't do anything to a boa. Don't forget that only a strong dragon can't cross the river. My junior fellow apprentice is a dragon, a strong dragon crossing the river. Sima Taxing said with a smile. Chaoji wants to get the Xinyuan pill and the Berserk pill. Unfortunately, he meets a strong dragon. In the end, he will lose more than gain. I'm not worried about Chaoji now. He is just a vanguard. The real worry is not him. Master, do you mean that abnormal guy? Chapter 697. Sect Leader. You mean that perverted guy? Protector Hao seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed slightly. He said in shock, That guy is indeed not to be trifled with. In addition, the two guys in front never care about the outside world. Right now, he is the only one who has the final say on the gold ranking. This time, the Symbol Alliance will probably fall into his hands. That guy is really perverted and strong. Mi Zixia, that guy is unfathomable. If it weren't for the two guys in front being special, he would be the only one in the younger generation of the ancient sky sect that could compare to Mu Ha. Mu Ha is still young, and he is enough to be one of the leaders of the younger generation of the ancient sky sect. Sima Ta Xing sighed. But now, there is a Du Xiaofu. That strong dragon is not to be trifled with. Protector Hao smiled. Sima Taxing Star said softly, The Talisman League competition. They're going to meet each other in advance. I wonder if something unexpected will happen this time. The night shrouded the mountain, and it was hazy and faintly discernible. At the peak of the mountain, there was a forest full of green bamboo. Within the bamboo forest, the courtyard was quiet. In the courtyard, there was a curtain of clouds and pearls hanging. On a stone platform, there was a four-cornered copper beast furnace emitting green smoke and a faint fragrance. On a stone platform, a young man in a light blue robe had his head slightly lowered. He was trimming a beautiful potted plant. The profound patterns on his sleeves fluttered and his blade was gentle. The contours of his face were lowered, and he was immersed in the world he had created. The young man's slender and white fingers were like moving clouds and flowing water as he fiddled with the potted plant in his hand. After a moment, a potted plant that looked like a phoenix spreading its wings was trimmed. It was done in one go, and it was vivid and lifelike. This pot of Phoenix Seeking Phoenix is only half complete. Today, I am not in the mood to complete the other half. The man in the blue robe stood up. On his handsome face, his long eyelashes and eyes that were like the stars formed a tempting arc. Any woman who looked at him would be intoxicated. Senior brother's state is something that we can't compare to. Chao Zhao, who had been quietly waiting at the side, spoke. He was extremely respectful in front of the young man in the brocade robe. Don't fight over it every day. It's not good for your cultivation. Tell me, how's it going? The young man in an embroidered robe spoke lightly, and he wiped his hands in a basin of clear water beside the stone platform with his sleeves, seeming as if they were untainted by smoke and fire. Thank you, senior brother. I've learned a lot. Chao Zhao stepped forward and passed over a clean handkerchief before he said to the young man in embroidered robes, However, that kid Du Xiaofu is even more difficult to deal with than I imagined. He's a tough nut to crack. However, he's already planning to participate in the Talisman League competition 3 days from now. The young man in the brocade robe gently wiped his hands. His silk-like glossy long black hair fell down like a waterfall. It was loosely tied up with a blue ribbon. Both of his eyes were suffused with some brown color, causing one to feel a chill in one's heart for no reason. However, one could not help but take a few more glances at him. Since he's a tough nut to crack, there are some things that can be done with gentleness. The effect might be better if we take a roundabout route. The young man in the brocade robe gently placed his handkerchief to the side. Two of his fingers pulled back his hair and slowly lowered it. He raised his head slightly, and his brown eyes emitted a little light under the night sky. He softly said, "This time, we have to take over the Talisman League beautifully. I don't want to see any flaws, and I won't allow the Tianxia Pavilion to become the Talisman League's flaw in the future. We have to nip it in the bud as soon as possible. It's only a year's time, so it's fine as long as it's peaceful. After a year, it's none of my business and I won't bother about it anymore. They can do whatever they want." The young man in the brocade robe paused for a moment before he opened his mouth and softly said, "I also heard that junior sister Muhan suffered some grievances back then. If there's a chance, I also want to meet her." "I understand, senior brother. An outsider won't be able to create any big waves. The Talisman League will only belong to us, and no one else will be able to touch it." Chao Zhao nodded. He then turned around and left under the eyes of the man in the brocade robe. The next morning, when Du Xiaofu came out of the ancient desolate space, his face was pale, and he looked like he had used up a lot of energy. Du Xiaofu then went to the office of the Talisman League in the inner sect to find the elder in charge of the Talisman League competition. He was going to fill in the information needed to participate in the Talisman League competition. More importantly, he had to prepare the resources needed to participate in the Talisman League competition. In order to ensure fairness and openness, all the materials for the Talisman League competition were provided by the ancient Heaven sect. However, the pills and talisman weapons that were refined in the end could only be considered Manchu. However, the pills and talisman weapons that were refined by the champion of the Alchemy Talisman Master and the Weapon Talisman Master could be given as a reward to the champion. This had always been the rule of the Manchu, and no one had any objections. After all the resources and materials were provided by the Manchu for free. After going to the office of the Talisman League in the inner sect, Du Xiaofu asked a few people and then found Elder Huang Yirong, who was in charge of the Talisman League competition. Elder Huang Yirong was a beautiful woman in her 40s whose cultivation was difficult for Du Xiaofu to see through. After receiving the registration form, Du Xiaofu carefully looked at the qualifications for the competition and a slight smile appeared on his face. "Elder Huang, is there a rule in the Manchu that a person can only participate in one of the competitions?" Du Xiaofu asked Elder Huang Yirong. "There is no such rule." Elder Huang Yirong naturally knew Du Xiaofu. She had been shocked when Du Xiaofu had broken through Mu Jiajia's talisman formation at the Tianwu Square. Looking at Du Xiaofu, Elder Huang Yirong said to Du Xiaofu, "The Manchu doesn't have any special rules. However, the competition between the Weapon Talisman Master and the Alchemy Talisman Master cannot be interfered with. It is slightly different from the competition between the Talisman Masters, so it will be held in advance for a total of 5 days. The competition between the Talisman Masters will only be held after that. Therefore, even if someone wants to participate in both competitions, they won't have the time or energy to do so." "That is indeed the case." Du Xiaofu smiled. Elder Huang Yirong was right. Ordinary talisman masters could mostly major in one type of talisman Dao and minor in another type of talisman Dao. It was extremely common for a talisman master to be proficient in 2 types of talisman Dao. For example, elder brother Jin Qingchun was a talisman master. However, his attainments in the alchemy talisman master were definitely not something ordinary alchemy talisman masters could compare to. Even Medicine King Yi Wuming was the same. Outsiders had always thought that Medicine King Yi Wuming was the strongest in the Alchemy Talisman Master realm. However, in reality, Medicine King Yi Wuming's attainments in the Weapon Talisman Master realm were definitely not inferior to the Alchemy Talisman Master realm. As for the Ancient Heaven Sect's Talisman Alliance competition, both the Alchemy Talisman Master and the Weapon Talisman Master realm would be held at the same time. For those Talisman Masters who were both Alchemy Talisman Masters and Weapon Talisman Masters, they would already be exhausted. Even talisman masters who were both alchemy talisman masters and weapon talisman masters and formation talisman masters would find it difficult to participate in the talisman master competition. The weapon talisman master competition and alchemy talisman master competition had just ended. They would definitely be exhausted. How could they have the strength to participate in the talisman master competition? If you want to participate in the talisman master competition, fill in the information first. Then, indicate the elixirs and refining materials that you need. When the competition starts, the Manchu will automatically place the same materials in front of you. We guarantee that the competition will be fair and just. Elder Huang Yirong said to Du Xiaofu. Okay, thank you, Elder Huang. Du Xiaofu nodded. He then filled in a lot of information on the form. After he was done, he handed it to Elder Huang and then left. Watching Du Xiaofu's back as he left, Elder Huang Yirong looked at the form that Du Xiaofu had just filled in. Suddenly, her gaze changed slightly. She murmured softly, "What is this kid trying to do? He can't be in two places. What is he trying to do?" After returning from the Talisman Master office, Du Xiaofu continued to plunge into the ancient, desolate space. With the start of the annual Talisman Master competition, it was enough to attract the entire Manchu's attention. Even the ancient Sky Sect and many outside forces were closely watching the Talisman Master competition to avoid sucking up to the wrong person. The Talisman Master competition could directly influence the sale and other control of the ancient Sky Sect's cultivation resources. This was of great importance to many outside forces. From the looks of it, the three champions of the Talisman Master competition this time are senior brothers Mi Zixia, Chao Zhao, and Gu Zong. The other senior brothers and sisters are not weak, but in terms of alchemy, array, and weapon talisman masters, Chao Zhao, Mi Zixia, and Gu Zong are the strongest. Don't forget that Martial Uncle Du is also participating this time. Martial Uncle Du's attainments in talisman arrays are extremely high. It's rumored that the Berserk Pill and Profound Spirit Pill were refined by Martial Uncle Du. There are also many talisman weapons and spiritual weapons that can be infused with beast energy. They were all made by Martial Uncle Du. Martial Uncle Du is indeed very strong. However, in terms of talisman formation master, senior brother Mi Zixia is a perfected 6-star spirit talisman master. He has already set up a perfected 6-star talisman formation. Although Martial Uncle Du is very strong, in terms of talisman formation master attainments, he is still slightly inferior to senior brother Mi Zixia. It's true that the Profound Spirit Pill and Berserk Pill were refined by Martial Uncle Du, but it's said that the highest level he refined was only at the beginning of the King Grade. Senior brother Chao Zhao has already refined King Grade Nirvana Realm Pills. In terms of weapon talisman masters, senior brother Gu Zong has already refined high-grade peak talisman weapons. The Manchu was abuzz with discussions. The Talisman Master competition had attracted everyone's attention, so not many people were paying attention to the World Pavilion these few days. The World Pavilion had been closed all this time. The Manchu disciples also understood that perhaps the grudge between the World Society and the Four Seas sect would be completely resolved after the Talisman Master competition. In the misty space, the temperature was extremely hot, as if it had experienced some kind of high temperature not long ago. Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged, his body enveloped in white light. His aura was ancient, and the light was glistening like a divine light, causing people's hearts to tremble. Chapter 699. No matter what, Du Xiaofu felt that he couldn't embarrass his master and brothers in Qingchun. Du Xiaofu, do you want to participate in the Alchemy Talisman Master or Weapon Talisman Master competition? Elder Hu Sankuan silently appeared next to Du Xiaofu. His gray beard moved slightly as he asked curiously, "I heard from Elder Huang that you filled in quite a number of spiritual herbs and weapon refining materials. Don't tell me you're planning to enter the competition at the same time?" Du Xiaofu smiled. Just as he was about to speak, a commotion suddenly broke out among the crowd of spectators and many spirit symbol masters. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the distant sky. Roar. The roar of a beast reverberated through the air. It seemed to contain a terrifying aura that caused many beasts to tremble in fear. A gigantic beast appeared in the sky. It was as white as jade and looked ferocious. It looked like a tiger and a leopard. It was a snow mountain tiger leopard and was one of the top beasts on the heavenly beast ranking. After the snow mountain tiger leopard, there were more than 10 gigantic beasts. They weren't ordinary beasts either. They stood there quietly and were all extraordinary individuals. A young man in a blue robe landed on top of the snow mountain tiger leopard. The young man's slender and fair fingers stretched out the sleeve of his blue brocade robe. His long eyelashes and bright eyes formed a seductive arc on his handsome face. Senior Mizishia is here. Senior Mizishia. With the arrival of the young man, the entire place was in an uproar. Screams could be heard everywhere. Many courageous female disciples couldn't wait to rush to the square and hug him. Is this Mizishia? He's really good looking. Du Xiaofu's gaze landed on Mizishia. He was ranked 3rd on the alchemy ranking and was a dual cultivator of martial Dao and talisman Dao. Swoosh, swoosh, many figures appeared behind Mizishia. They were all extraordinary. They were Cao Zhao and the rest. Not long after Mizishia, Cao Zhao and the rest entered. The time for the Talisman Alliance competition was approaching. All right, quiet down. Elder Huang Yirong stood up and her clear voice echoed throughout the Tianwu Plaza. The surrounding discussions quieted down. At this moment, all the talisman masters in the field raised their heads and stood in order. They quietly looked at Elder Huang Yirong on the high platform with awe in their eyes. I presume everyone already knows the rules of the annual Talisman Association Grand Competition. Alchemy Talisman Masters and Artifact Talisman Masters will compete in the first round for 5 days. The winners will refine the highest grade and most effective medicinal pills, talisman tools, Dao artifacts, and so on. The panel of elders will be the judges, and the panel of elders can decide all matters related to the competition. Those who exceed 5 days will be considered to have lost. The Talisman Master Grand Competition will be held in 5 days. Elder Huang Yirong looked at the crowd and said, "Now, the Talisman Masters participating in the Array Talisman Master Competition will come out first. The Talisman Masters participating in the Medicine Talisman Master and Weapon Talisman Master Competition will find your own refining platform in the center of the square." At the center of the plaza, many stone platforms and seats had already been set up, and they were separated by a distance of several hundred feet. These were the places where the Soul Symbol Masters who were participating in the Symbol Alliance Grand Competition would display their skills. As Elder Huang Yirong finished speaking, the Soul Symbol Masters participating in the Talisman Master Grand Competition retreated to the side one by one. As for the Artifact Talisman Master and Medicine Talisman Master Competition participants, they each went to the stone platforms and found their own seats. Du Xiaofu, your seat is at the very front. The materials you requested have also been placed on the refining platform according to double the amount. The rest is up to you. Elder Huang Yirong said to Du Xiaofu in a low voice, and her gaze indicated the first few stone platforms among the 100 over stone platforms. Those were the stone platforms that attracted the most attention. Those who were able to stand on those stone platforms were obviously not ordinary disciples. Following Elder Huang Yirong's gaze, Du Xiaofu looked over and smiled bitterly. From the position of the stone platform, one could tell that it was the kind of seat that would attract the limelight. From the looks of it, he had no choice but to stand out this time. Little junior brother, go ahead. That seat is not bad. Make Master proud, and as your senior brother, I can also bask in the glory. Yu Wanli went forward and said to Du Xiaofu, "Thank you, Elder Huang. Third senior brother, I'll go first." Du Xiaofu thanked Elder Huang Yirong, and then said to his third senior brother, Yu Wanli. Faint golden profound chi surged from the soles of his feet, and under many gazes, his figure rose into the air and landed in front of the stone platform. He found his extremely eye-catching stone platform seat at a glance and landed on it. In front of the stone platform seat, Du Xiaofu's figure landed. Senior brother Mi Zixia will definitely win. Senior brother Mi Zixia will definitely win. Suddenly, there was an explosion of extremely worshipful screams, and the female disciples were shouting at the top of their lungs. All of them were captivated by Mi Zixia. Go for it, President. Go for it, Senior brother Cao Zhao. Go for it, Senior brother Guzong. Among the surrounding shouts, The cheers of Du Xiaofu, Song Xuanxuan, Gu Zong, and the other disciples could also be heard. However, compared to Mi Zixia, the attention they received was much smaller. Especially among the female disciples, almost all of them were cheering for Mi Zixia. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked. He was surprised to see Cao Zhao and Mi Zixia on the 3 stone platforms dozens of feet away from him. On the other stone platform, there was a burly young man who wasn't tall, but was extremely muscular and powerful. The aura on his body wasn't simple. Du Xiaofu wasn't surprised to see Cao Zhao participating in the competition. However, when he saw Mi Zixia, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but feel strange. It was said that Mi Zixia was the most popular candidate for the champion of the Talisman Array Master competition. However, at this moment, it was the Medicine Talisman Master and Weapon Talisman Master competition. This made Du Xiaofu feel a little strange. Could it be that Mi Zixia changed to participate in the Medicine Talisman Master and Talisman Master competition? Du Xiaofu felt a little suspicious. Then, he saw Cao Zhao on the left looking at him with a cold smile in his eyes. Ignoring Cao Zhao, Du Xiaofu looked at his own stone platform. At this moment, there was a Qingkuan bag on the stone platform. Du Xiaofu used his mental energy to probe it and found that he had filled in double the amount of elixir and weapon refinement materials. The Manchu was probably afraid that there would be a mistake during the refinement process, so they specially prepared double the amount of materials. However, if these 2 sets of materials failed, he would automatically lose the qualifications to participate in the competition. The materials provided by the Manchu couldn't be wasted without a limit. Humph. Participating in the Talisman Alliance competition is just asking for humiliation. Some debts will be settled when the time comes. Cao Zhao looked at Du Xiaofu with a sneer on his face. Looks like Mi Zixia's voice is the loudest. I didn't expect that Mi Zixia would also participate in the Medicine Talisman Master competition. He's a Talisman Master, and the position of Alliance Chief has already been decided behind closed doors. Why bother to participate in the Medicine Talisman Master competition? At the Elders and Protectors' seats, looking at Mi Zixia, some Elders and Protectors were also whispering to each other. Now, I announce that the Talisman Alliance competition begins. Elder Huang Yirong's voice contained profound energy as it reverberated around the square. Buzz. As Elder Huang Yirong's voice sounded, a deep and melodious ancient bell rang out, announcing the official start of the Talisman Alliance competition. At this moment, the shouts and cheers in the surroundings immediately quieted down. All the Soul Talisman Masters present were checking their elixir and weapon refinement materials. Multicolored light filled the air as energy rippled. The Medicine Talisman Masters and Weapon Talisman Masters placed their Qingkuan bags and Weapon Talisman Masters in front of them. Rumble. After a short moment of silence, over 100 Medicine Talisman Masters and Weapon Talisman Masters formed hand seals and condensed various spiritual cauldrons and symbol cauldrons in front of them. As soon as the spiritual cauldrons and symbol cauldrons appeared, a powerful and terrifying aura spread out. Walala! Flames rose from the spiritual cauldrons and symbol cauldrons like gorgeous fireworks. The temperature of the entire square immediately rose violently. Over 100 spiritual cauldrons and symbol cauldrons appeared, and their powerful auras rippled out. The magnificent scene immediately made the blood of the surrounding spectators boil. Many of them raised their arms and cheered in all directions. The dazzling spiritual cauldrons and symbol cauldrons revolved in front of Cao Zhao. Flames whistled as elixir after elixir was thrown into the spiritual cauldron to be refined. His actions were done in a single breath, and his every movement was extraordinary. In terms of refining medicinal pills, Cao Zhao indeed also had some genuine ability and material. A tall and sturdy young man with a spiritual cauldron in front of him was unexpectedly filled with peculiar blue flames. The energy in his hands wrapped around the spiritual cauldron, and he threw the elixir into the spiritual cauldron to refine it. His actions were extremely steady and not vulgar. This person should be Gu Zong. Du Xiaofu looked at the tall and sturdy young man. From his actions and the aura spreading out from his body, he should be Gu Zong, who was rumored to be the most likely to win the Weapon Talisman Master Championship this time. This spiritual cauldron seems to be out of the ordinary. Du Xiaofu's gaze then fell on the spiritual cauldron condensed in front of Mi Zixia. Dazzling runes flickered on the spiritual cauldron, which was wrapped in the radiance of white, black, red, and yellow. On the spiritual cauldron of these four colors, a terrifying aura swept out like a storm, greatly affecting the spiritual cauldrons of the nearby talisman masters. He is also refining pills. Seeing the energy in Mi Zixia's hands wrapped around the spiritual cauldron, Du Xiaofu's brows twitched slightly. Afterwards, he calmed himself down, and after taking a deep breath, Du Xiaofu took out a pile of refining materials from his Qinkuan bag, neatly arranging them on the stone platform. Afterwards, Du Xiaofu calmly stood in front of the stone platform, his eyes slightly closed, as if this talisman alliance great competition had nothing to do with him. Mi Zixia's spiritual cauldron is not weak. With him participating in the Alchemy Talisman Master Competition, I'm afraid that Cao Zhao has no chance of winning the championship. 2 updates in a row. I woke up early this morning to update, but who would have thought that I would habitually sleep until the afternoon? My mistake is too big. Let's continue writing. Today, I will continue to update as an apology. Chapter 700. In the Artifact Symbol Master Competition, Gu Zong should be the Manchu's strongest of his generation. He should be the champion. What is Du Xiaofu doing? Why hasn't he started yet? Is Du Xiaofu going to participate in the Medicine Symbol Master Competition or the Artifact Symbol Master Competition? It's said that Du Xiaofu is an all-round symbol master. Who knows if that's true or not? On the high platform, many elders and protectors saw that Du Xiaofu wasn't preparing to make a move and were rather puzzled. Sharpening a knife doesn't require any effort to chop wood. In this kind of competition, Du Xiaofu can still be so shocking. Elder Huang Yirong looked at Du Xiaofu, whose eyes were slightly closed, with some shock in her eyes. Chi. Just as Elder Huang Yirong's voice fell, Du Xiaofu's slightly closed eyes suddenly opened. With a sweep of his purple gown sleeves, a series of hand signs immediately condensed. Suddenly, his purple gown fluttered, and an extremely ancient aura burst out from Du Xiaofu's body. Along with the rapid gathering of symbols in front of him, a spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron was finally formed. Bang! The spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron condensed by Du Xiaofu appeared, and a blazing aura spread out. The mysterious symbols on the cauldron flickered incessantly. White, green, black, red, and yellow. These 5 symbols flickered. Above the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, there was a faint golden radiance. The mysterious symbols on the cauldron seemed to be able to transform endlessly, giving birth to all things in the world. Chi. At this moment, many of the spiritual furnaces and symbol cauldrons of the surrounding symbol masters trembled, as if they had received some kind of enormous pressure. Fortunately, the competition had just begun. If it had reached the most critical juncture of the competition, the appearance of Du Xiaofu's spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron would have been enough to cause many symbol masters to fail and leave the competition. Walala! Around the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron condensed by Du Xiaofu, a huge pressure descended. Blazing flames leapt about, and the mysterious symbols on the cauldron were boundless, indescribably mysterious and unfathomable. That is, 5 colored runes. Those are spiritual stoves and symbol cauldrons with 5 different attributes. That brat is really abnormal, to be able to condense a 5-colored cauldron. At that moment, Elder Huang Yirong and many other elders and protectors were stunned. They blinked their eyes as if they were in disbelief. To these elders and protectors of the ancient heaven sect, they naturally knew what a 5-colored cauldron represented. How many spirit talisman masters in this world could condense a 5-colored cauldron? The spiritual stove symbol cauldron condensed, and Du Xiaofu waved his hand, wrapping a piece of millennium-inscribed iron on the stone table before throwing it into the cauldron, gradually starting the refining process. Refining materials? Du Xiaofu isn't going to participate in the alchemist competition, but the blacksmith competition. It's said that Du Xiaofu made a bet with Cao Zhao of the Talisman League. If the Talisman League can't win the Medicine Talisman Master Competition, They'll have to hand over the pill formulas of the Profound Origin pill and Berserker pill and accept the Talisman League's judgment. Could it be that Du Xiaofu saw me Zixia participate in the Medicine Talisman Master Competition? So he decided to participate in the Blacksmith Talisman Master Competition instead? Seeing Du Xiaofu refining the refining materials, many elders and protectors naturally knew about the battle between Du Xiaofu and the Four Seas Gang and the Talisman League on the Tianwu Square a few days ago. Therefore, at this moment, seeing Du Xiaofu give up on the Medicine Talisman Master Competition, many elders and protectors were rather surprised. At this time, Du Xiaofu was already immersed in refining the materials. His soul force was wrapped around the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, and he was in control of everything inside it. During the refining process, Du Xiaofu was calm and steady. Recently, he had definitely made great progress in refining. If it was in the past, Du Xiaofu wouldn't have had much confidence in participating in this kind of competition. But now, the situation was somewhat different. Because of the World Pavilion, Du Xiaofu had recently invested a lot of time and energy in refining. Coupled with the help of the secret weapon art left behind by his master, the Weapon Sovereign, his gains were undoubtedly huge. Refining weapons and pills didn't have much of a difference in the steps. The first step was to refine the materials to extract the purest spirit liquid or lava. This kind of refining required extremely strict control over the temperature. If the temperature was too high or too low, the final refining materials would be wasted. After spending several hours refining the first millennium inscribed iron to a level that he thought was about right, Du Xiaofu proceeded to carefully throw the second expensive refining material into the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron in front of him. At this moment, all the medicine talisman masters and weapon talisman masters in the surroundings were completely focused on refining the materials in their hands. The surrounding spectators were completely silent. They all knew that no matter if it was refining pills or refining weapons, they couldn't be disturbed by the outside world. The talisman masters participating in the Talisman Alliance competition were all at least 5-star talisman masters. Therefore, they were refining at least marquee-grade pills and high-grade spiritual weapons, or even king-grade pills and symbol weapons. This wasn't something that could be done in a short time, so the competition was limited to 5 days. To the spectating disciples of the Munchu, they were all cultivators. They would be able to learn a lot in 5 days, so it wasn't a big deal. Regardless of whether it was refining pills or refining totem weapons or talisman weapons, the first step of refining was extremely time-consuming. Bang! On the afternoon of the second day, the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron of a 5-star talisman master directly exploded for some unknown reason. The refined spiritual liquid gushed out, and he spouted blood from his mouth. Sai, a 5-star Permethought talisman master, actually wanted to refine pills at the peak of the marquee grade. Furthermore, he was too nervous and used too much strength. In the end, he couldn't control it and let his spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron explode. He could only withdraw. Elder Huang Yirong looked at the youth whose spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron had exploded, her eyes filled with regret. This can't be blamed on them. In this kind of competition, everyone would want to go all out. It's hard to avoid some uncontrollable situations. Elder Hu Sankuan said, "There's nothing wrong with going all out, but one should act according to one's ability. Otherwise, it would only be harmful to oneself." Elder Huang Yirong said. Elder Hu Sankuan smiled. Experiencing this kind of failure will be beneficial to them in the future. In the field, the youth who had just failed had a lifeless look and a deathly pale face. In the end, he could only helplessly withdraw. Creak, creak. Following the withdrawal of this youth, as if affected by the explosion of his spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, several youths' spiritual furnaces and symbol cauldrons started to shake, and the spiritual liquid extracted from them could no longer be used. Those youths were cursing loudly, as if blaming the first youth for being a burden to them. But all of them had no choice but to immediately prepare to refine again. Everyone had 2 sets of spiritual medicines and refining materials, so they all had 1 chance of failure. It could be said that only a colossus like the ancient Heaven sect could have such a background, to be able to provide 2 sets of spiritual medicines and refining materials for their disciples to participate in the competition for free. Du Xiaofu didn't pay too much attention to the surrounding influence. Although he was aware of it, he remained unmoved and kept refining his own refining materials. As time passed, on the third day, several more talisman masters and tool talisman masters had no choice but to withdraw. At this time, after 2 full days, Du Xiaofu had refined a total of more than a dozen kinds of expensive refining materials into pure refining lava without any mishaps. Inside the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, multicolored lights soared to the sky, and energy surged with whistling sounds. Fusion, Du Xiaofu proceeded to the second step, which was to fuse these different refining magma together. In this process, his control over the power of his soul had reached a very demanding level. His mind was spying on the slightest movements inside the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron. With the help of the flames, all kinds of refining materials were gradually fused together under Du Xiaofu's control. It was only a matter of time before they were completely fused together. Walala! On the evening of the third day, a talisman master succeeded in refining a pill, and his face rippled with unconcealable pride. But he wasn't very happy. Although he was the first to refine a pill, it was only at the marquis level. Those refining pills of the king level naturally took a bit longer, and marquis level pills naturally couldn't compare with king level pills, so he had no chance to win the championship. Late at night, another talisman master succeeded in refining a pill, and another talisman master succeeded in refining a spiritual tool. Unceasing sounds rang out, and fluctuations of energy kept reverberating in the square. On the morning of the fourth day, a king-level pill appeared. Its energy spread, and multicolored light shone, shocking everyone. On the afternoon of the fourth day, one king-level pill after another appeared outside the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron. King-level pills of the mysterious level and king-level pills of the Prometha level all started to appear, giving rise to waves of shouts. A mid-level talisman weapon has appeared. At dusk, an extraordinary young man refined a large saber that was a middle-grade practitioner weapon. The might of the saber spread, causing many elders and protectors to nod endlessly in their hearts. At this time, in the whole square, only the last 4 people were still refining: Mi Zixia, Chao Zhao, Guzong, and Du Xiaofu. 2 were refining pills, and 2 were refining tools. The 4 of them attracted everyone's attention. The spectating disciples and elders on the platform all clearly understood that if nothing unexpected happened, the final champion of the Talisman Master and Talisman Master would definitely be one of 2 of these 4 people. The only thing they didn't know was which 2 of them would truly stand out among the 4. Time slowly passed again, and in front of the 4 people, the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron spread out, rippling with dazzling symbols and astonishing fluctuations of energy. On the evening of the 4th day, when the last afterglow disappeared, the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron in front of Chao Zhao trembled, and a pill with dazzling multicolored light swept out. Its radiance was dazzling, and its energy was whistling. There is still a chapter about paying back debts, and it will be written very late. Brothers, you can read it tomorrow morning. Chapter 701. Complete King Great Elixir. When the pill appeared, multicolored light soared into the sky. The eyes of many elders and protectors trembled. That was a complete King Grade pill. Chao Zhao is extraordinary. He actually refined a complete King Grade Elixir. If Mi Zixia didn't participate, Chao Zhao would definitely be the champion. Some elders and protectors sighed. Chao Zhao's skill in refining elixirs was extraordinary. If Mi Zixia didn't interfere, he would definitely be the champion. However, if Mi Zixia made a mistake, Chao Zhao would still have a chance to win the competition. Chao Zhao's eyes were filled with joy as he refined a complete King Great Elixir. He then glanced at Du Xiaofu, who was still refining. No matter what, he knew that Du Xiaofu wouldn't be able to cause any trouble this time. Did he think that he could avoid this calamity by avoiding the competition between Alchemy Talisman Masters and becoming the champion of Weapon Talisman Masters? What a smart move. Unfortunately, it's 2 against 1. Even if he can suppress Guzong, it won't be enough to turn the tables. Moreover, Guzong isn't easy to deal with. Chao Zhao sneered. He seemed to be confident about the result. The Talisman League competition was still going on. As the last 3 people continued, the atmosphere became tense. Everyone held their breaths, afraid that they would disturb the last three people. Late at night, the space around the Tianwu Square silently began to fluctuate. It was so dense that it was difficult to disperse. This kind of energy fluctuation was very strange. The faint aura made people's souls tremble. Under the fluctuations of this aura, many of the elders and protectors of the ancient heaven sect seemed to have sensed something at the same time, and their faces began to reveal looks of surprise one after another. Could it be? The elders and protectors looked at each other. Then, they became nervous and expectant. Hula. Under the nervous and expectant gazes of the Manchu elders and protectors, dawn gradually arrived. On the Tianwu Square, a patch of dark clouds appeared in the early morning. The sky was dark, and the sky was dark. The strange energy fluctuation of heaven and earth could be heard faintly from the dark clouds. Dark clouds spread over and gradually covered the sky. Waves of strange and astonishing auras that made one's soul palpitate rippled and spread out in all directions. What happened? What happened? Seeing the dark clouds covering the sky and the dim light, an uproar broke out among the spectating disciples. In particular, the invisible aura that spread out caused the hearts of the surrounding disciples to palpitate. Boom! Right at this time, when the first rays of the morning sun were projected from the east, the spiritual stove and talisman cauldron in front of Guzong suddenly let out a rumbling sound. Afterwards, from the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of Guzong, a huge hammer rushed out, already engraved with dazzling talisman patterns. Dazzling light soared into the sky, and the shocking aura on the hammer fluctuated as if it was alive. Withdraw! Guzong shouted and waved his hand. The hammer flew into his hand, and a terrifying aura spread out in all directions. A high-grade peak Dao artifact. It can be considered a half-Dao artifact. It almost attracted a one-star lightning tribulation. I didn't expect Guzong's attainments in artifact forging to have reached such a level. Even among his peers in the Central Plains, he is absolutely extraordinary. It is almost a true half-Dao artifact. Guzong is extraordinary. Looking at the huge hammer in Guzong's hand, all the elders and protectors sighed in admiration. Even Elder Huang Yirong's eyes were filled with admiration. Guzong put away the hammer in his hand. His face was deathly pale, and he stuffed a pill into his mouth. Afterwards, his gaze fell on Du Xiaofu. In the air, dark clouds gathered. Just as they were about to disperse, they suddenly gathered again. The momentum seemed to be even stronger than before. Waves of dark clouds gathered and gradually gathered towards Mizixia. Without a doubt, this movement was caused by Mizixia. Boom! Under the attentive gazes of everyone present, a pill wrapped in dazzling talisman characters rushed out of Mizixia's spiritual stove and talisman cauldron. Olo! The pill soared into the sky, accompanied by a dragon's roar. A faintly discernible image of a huge dragon appeared in the gathering dark clouds. This is my ancient heaven sect's dragon star mysterious heaven pill. It is said that when refined to the peak, a dragon's roar will shake the heavens. It is a true half-royal grade pill comparable to a royal grade pill. A half-royal grade pill. Mizixia is only a medicine talisman master. I didn't expect him to have such astonishing attainments in alchemy. All the elders and protectors gasped in astonishment. The pill that Mizixia had successfully refined was a genuine half-royal grade elixir. Among the younger generation, there were not many who could compete with him in terms of alchemy. Senior brother Mizixia will win. Senior brother Mizixia is unrivaled. The appearance of the half-royal grade pill caused many cheers in the surroundings. They were all cheering for Mizixia. Astonishing sound waves reverberated in the square. Chi. The pill was withdrawn. Mizixia's face was slightly pale, and he stuffed a pill into his mouth. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky were dispersing, and the astonishing pressure was disappearing. Mizixia's gaze seemed to be rather interested. He looked at Du Xiaofu in the end. At this moment, only Du Xiaofu was still refining in the entire square. In the spiritual cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu, the runes were dazzling. The shape of a spear could be faintly seen. Astonishing fluctuations spread out from the spear. It seemed to make people's hearts beat faster with a single glance. Suddenly, the spear shot out from the spiritual cauldron. It was engraved with dense runes, like a dragon soaring into the sky. The spear revolved above the spiritual cauldron, dragging out circles of runes. It seemed to be engulfed by a boundless spear aura. It emitted a hazy mist, and an extremely terrifying aura rippled out. The spiritual artifact had been completed, and the spear had appeared. Its might was extraordinary. A peak high-grade practitioner artifact, comparable to a half-Dao artifact. The practitioner artifact refined by Du Xiaofu seems to have an extraordinary aura. It's extremely extraordinary. However, it did not cause any special reaction. It is only a peak high-grade practitioner artifact. This spear is very extraordinary, but compared to the half-Dao artifact refined by Guzong, it is still a little lacking. However, it is only a little lacking. It is already extraordinary. In terms of cultivation level, Du Xiaofu is only at the mysterious 6-star level, while Guzong is already at the complete 6-star level. If the two were at the same level, I'm afraid that today's victory would not have been Guzong. Looking at the spear practitioner artifact refined by Du Xiaofu, the elders and protectors on the high platform discussed animatedly. A peak high-grade practitioner artifact. Martial Uncle Du is extraordinary, but in terms of refining, he seems to be inferior to senior brother Guzong. Around the square, there were many disciples with good eyesight. They could see that the spear practitioner artifact refined by Du Xiaofu was extraordinary, but in terms of level, it was still inferior to Guzong's. And here I was thinking how extraordinary he was. As expected, he brought disgrace upon himself. In the crowd, Chao Zhao looked at Du Xiaofu with a sneer. Hey, look, what is that kid Du Xiaofu doing? It seems that he has not finished refining yet. What is Martial Uncle Du doing? At this moment, when everyone thought that Du Xiaofu's victory was already decided, they saw that Du Xiaofu's hands were still condensing hand signs. On top of the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, the dazzling mysterious patterns on the spear rippled, emitting a hazy mist. Like strands of auspicious clouds, it resonated with the energy of the world. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was completely isolated from the surrounding discussions and gazes. His whole body was covered in a white radiance, like a divine radiance, and an ancient aura was released. Following the condensing of hand signs, golden mysterious patterns appeared on Du Xiaofu's palms. The golden mysterious patterns then arranged themselves and evolved, starting to condense into the illusion of a golden-winged rock. Gee! At this instant, a cry came from the golden-winged rock's mouth, rumbling like thunder. A tyrannical power descended from the sky, suppressing everything and engulfing the sky. Golden-winged rock? What is Du Xiaofu planning to do? On the high platform, in the surroundings of the square, everyone was stunned. No one knew what Du Xiaofu was planning to do at this moment. At this moment, in the sky above the Tianwu Square, a kind of energy fluctuation that was basically hard to disperse quietly appeared. The aura made people's souls throb, and then a black cloud covered the sky. On the high platform, some elders and protectors raised their heads, and the surrounding disciples' complexions started to change. Bang! In a short time, within the black cloud, a faint sound of thunder resounded, and an aura that made people's souls palpitate rippled and spread in this part of the world, even spreading into the distance. Why are there black clouds gathering again? Seeing the black clouds covering the sky again, the surrounding disciples went into an uproar. At this moment, Mizixia and Guzong also raised their heads to look at the black clouds gathering in the sky. Under everyone's gazes, the black clouds in the sky did not condense like Mizixia and Guzong, but instead began to disperse. These black clouds gradually changed under everyone's gazes, rippling like waves. In the end, they seemed to want to completely condense together. Secret soldier art, fuse. In front of the stone platform in the square, Du Xiaofu shouted loudly, and the last hand seal condensed. The illusion of the golden-winged rock roared, turning into a dazzling golden mysterious pattern, and charged directly at the spear on the spiritual stove. Gee! In an instant, the cries of the rock resounded in the sky, and the golden mysterious pattern and the dazzling runes on the spear immediately began to collide, surging in all directions. Using the secret soldier art, Du Xiaofu controlled the mysterious pattern of the golden-winged rock to fuse into the spear, inscribing the mysterious pattern of the golden-winged rock on the spear, and fusing it with beast energy. It was just that this process was extremely difficult and complicated, and every single mysterious pattern could not be easily inscribed on a Dao talisman weapon. However, to Du Xiaofu, this seemed to be something that he was already familiar with, and his improvement in artifact forging was definitely not ordinary. Fusing with beast energy, Du Xiaofu is fusing beast energy into the spear. Today is the fourth watch.